Morning, good morning. Hello. So, greetings. Yeah, Simon makes one mistake where he usually leaves the slide up right now. I make another where I leave the banner up while we're playing the countdown.
And you probably haven't picked the right microphone for your system either.
It sounds it died. 1 sec.
Oh, let's see. How many different things have to work right? You sound much better.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. How many things have to go right for us to do the show even most of the way? So
one thing that I posted in the chat, that the number of billions of things that have to go right just to be able to launch the app is like 100 times more than it took to put a man on the moon.
Yeah, it seems like that way for almost everything. Hopefully my sound is coming through okay. I seem to be hearing you guys.
Am I better now?
We didn't. Yes, you're great. It's we didn't quite do a sound check before the beginning of the show because we're starting really like hurriedly. And you may notice Simon's not here. Simon is stuck on a train. He'll be here soon, but we're going to
say goodbye to this person. I'm about to kick them.
No. Which person? Oh, okay. Yeah, old guys. I'm really the only one that qualifies as that. You know, I'm getting close to what should be retirement age, but probably won't be because I have work to do. I have a mission in life. So hi, and we're coming up on 3 people right immediately. Scott, you want to explain that? We normally only come up on a 2 shot. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. I'm like, what?
Sorry, too early for you.
All 3 of us. You know, let's do things a little bit differently. Okay. Randall, introduce yourself. We don't have slides for you, so
we don't have slides for everything yet. Hi, I'm Randall Schwartz. I am a Dart and Flutter Google developer expert from the very beginning of that program for Google. And I spend as much of my day as I can helping people out with their Flutter and Dart problems. And been doing that for quite a while. I also produce things for my YouTube channel, and I attend pretty much every virtual Flutter meetup in the world that I am time zone compatible with. So that's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Do not ever get Randall on the subject of time zones. Just don't do it.
Right.
Trust me, don't do it.
Yes.
To people who are already trying to put questions in there without the queue, please, because what happens is there's a large volume of stuff, and a lot of times we skim it. We can't read every single one. Because in addition to what you see, we're also looking up web pages, pulling up gists. We're doing all this stuff because we're looking 2 and 3 questions ahead. So when we turn around and say, oh, here's this question. Oh, look, here's this web page. Don't think that we weren't Googling that about a minute beforehand, because we didn't like pull the answer out of the thin air.
Simon does it simultaneously while talking. I don't know how to do
I'm just using ChatGPT. No.
Yeah. So let's Scott. We still got to get Scott introduced and Danielle introduced.
Right. Ladies first.
Why, thank you very much. I'm Danielle.
Your sound is dropping a little bit.
Okay.
Except he's gonna talk over your introduction now.
Too, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Am I okay?
Go. Yes.
All right. Good. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Danielle Cox. You should know me by now. I've been trying to show up every single week. I miss it every now and then. And I lead a small team of Flutter developers. There's 4 of us, and here in the U.S. I'm also an organizer of the Flutteristas. We had an awesome panel at FlutterCon about the Flutteristas, so I can't wait for that to get up and you all can see it and learn a little bit more about us. If we have any female or non-binary folk out there that haven't joined yet, hit me up and I'll get you set up and I'll get you joined, and that's pretty amazing. And as of today, I'm at least a quasi-regular, like somewhat official. So I get to be here at the beginning, which is really awesome.
It's cool. It's cool. Well, you deserve it. You've been here enough times now that.
Well, you know what this means, though. Okay, you don't get to have the starring slide anymore.
I know. It's kind of like you don't have any other ones.
Yeah, you come into the house and after 5 minutes, you're no longer a guest. Go get your own drink.
Exactly.
Yep. Exactly.
So, alrighty, exactly. I am Scott Stahl. Been around Flutter since the 6th commit, September 2017. A lot of us have helped put together the infrastructure. If you don't know the history of the Flutter community, basically myself and a couple other people looked around and said, well, where are the forums? Where are the chat rooms? Where's all this stuff that, people use to support each other? And there was only one chat channel for Flutter, and people said, well, we don't have those things. And I had just come out of a situation where I did have them. And in short, I compared life before that to having that. And in Flutter, they said, well, now you have to go back to the way things were before you had that kind of help. And I said, go to hell. Yeah. So I talked to a few other people and we all agreed. So we started building a Medium. We built the Slacks. We built the Zoom. We built. Next thing you know, Frankenstein's monster got out of control, and here we are.
Yeah.
So I am co-organizer of GDG Cleveland, owner of the Flutter Community Slack, which you can get to from, I know it's here someplace. Okay, I'll just keep talking while I'm looking for that.
Flutter.dev/community is what you're looking for, I'm sure.
Yes, I know.
That little, you're looking for the right tag in the data. There we go.
I had to find it right. We've only got about 40 of these banners that I had to search through. But you can go to flutter.dev community. You can find the Flutter Community Slack. We're over 20,000 people on there. And also, while you're there, go to the Discord. Okay. Those guys are awesome on the Discord as well. You don't have to be one or the other. This is not any kind of competition at all. We're all here trying to help each other. So, and yes, as Christian pointed out, there was just a huge Flutter event. And I think someone here might have been there because I saw her photo bombing something. What was that? Nilay and somebody. And next thing I know, I see this purple hair behind them.
Right.
Yeah.
That was actually kind of funny because just a little story behind that is Nilay took a picture of just him and then took a picture of the 3 of us and then took the person that took that picture, brought them into the picture with us. And then the person that took that picture brought that picture into us. So we kept growing the pictures as we went along. It's really cool.
Wow. Cool.
FlutterCon was amazing. Greg did a great job. Simon and obviously did a great job helping out. Majid did a great job helping out. 90 speakers for Flutter on the Flutter side of that.
Huge.
It was amazing. We also got a lot of people.
I'm so upset that I missed it because I was on the speakers list, and due to work, I had to back out.
I remember. So I got to hang out at the Flutter booth because we shared that with Flutter Berlin, the Flutter booth, and then and Eric came and hung out with us for quite a while. So he kind of set up there at that booth, Eric Seidel.
Nice.
And then the Flutteristas were there, and so it was really neat. Just kind of hanging out there with that group and having all the people come up and talk to them, and also the number of people. So our I don't have my lanyard up here right now, but the Flutter lanyards are like a light blue, and the Android con, the DroidCon lanyards were dark blue, and we could go back and forth a lot, and so we were seeing a lot of Flutter curiosity, I think, from people that were actually DroidCon.
Cool.
People.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's one other thing to wrap up about me real quick. Roy, I'll get you for this later. There's kind of a joke. I speak some Spanish, right? But I learned to speak Spanish down around the Mexican border and from some people I know who grew up in Hermosillo. So I'll be speaking to people from Argentina or Colombia, and I'll say a phrase that they just don't use. And they'll turn around, like Roy will turn around and look at me, and he's like, man, you're speaking Mexican again.
Well, one of the things kind of related to that I love to do is if I meet someone from Brazil, I happen to know one Brazilian word. And so, of course, everybody thinks that, no, I know several Portuguese words. I know one Brazilian word, but everybody assumes that because I speak Portuguese that's what I meant, and I'm just being stupid. And I'm like, no, but yeah, I think it came to Brazilian through one of the native languages there, and it's Xara. I can't quite pronounce it right. It's Shara, something like that, and it means someone that has the same name as you. It's your name too.
Nice.
And that does not exist in Portuguese. It's a Brazilian word.
Yeah, it's interesting how many things in English we have to explain with a phrase, and other languages just have a word.
Yeah,
that means the same thing.
I'm sure
the English is so messed up.
Same is true in reverse, though. There are some things that we can say in one or two words that take a whole phrase for them. So it doesn't.
There are entire Instagram channels devoted to how messed up English is, and they're hilarious. I think George Carlin kicked it all off. I mean, English is the only language stupid enough that we drive on the parkway and park in the driveway.
Before we get too distracted, we should talk about that this show is about your questions and our answers. Right now, all we're doing is sort of waiting for the queue to get just a little bit bigger before we start drilling into that. So we're doing a bit of social time for that before that. That's kind of our standard strategy. So, and Simon's not going to be probably up to an hour. Sorry,
what's that, Daniel?
How does the queue get filled?
The queue gets filled because people are putting questions in the live chat. We have a live chat with a number of people here. That's always true about everything. It's always a number of, because a number one is a number, right? So it's a number of people in the chat room right now, way more than one. But questions are coming in, and you do that by putting Q: in front of the questions. That flags it specially for me. I'm watching for those specifically. So I presume that if you don't put Q: in front of it, it's not for us. It's just you talking amongst each other, which you do a lot. In this show, people are chatting with each other a lot.
And they're answering each other's questions before we even get to them. So then it's no longer necessary for us to talk about it. And we would just cover it for the sake of completeness so that you who are watching later, because we always have well into 4 digits people who watch later. It's funny. We get about 40 people live, and we get well over 1,000 viewers later, which tells me, people in Flutter now have jobs, which is pretty cool. Because before we could get, there was that one day we had 6,000 live for the
Really?
Flutter challenge thing in the middle of the day on the East Coast, which told me that, there weren't that many Flutter jobs yet. But now people are at work. Right now we've got 20 live, which tells me the other 1,000 who are going to watch later are making money, which that's cool. And in fact, are we all employed? Finally, we are.
I'm more employed than I was 2 weeks ago. Yes. I'm
say the first 3 years, Danielle? Randall, the first 3 years or so that we were building the community, no, we were delivering pizzas in the evening and doing this during the day.
I wasn't even doing that. It was scary. But I am accepting clients still. I have some empty slots in my schedule, but it's nice that I actually have 2 more meetings after this meeting today already. So this is good. Those are billable hours. I like that. So I'm happier with my current situation. I'm also happy, since we're still in the social hour, I'm also happy that while I couldn't come to the conference you all are talking about just recently, or for anything really for the last year and a half, because I broke my hip and it's really I lumber through any, so I can only walk about a block, and that's not conducive to a conference environment.
Definitely not.
And so, but I have been scheduled for a hip replacement on September 19th. Talk like a pirate day. Someone say, "Hey, put a peg leg in, make sure it's mahogany." So I can do that when they go in and put me under the knife. And that means probably I won't be grounded past December. So anything that's happening starting December, I should probably start being able to schedule travel for, which as a GDE, I get some compensation for, it's been annoying. It's like, I can't go to a conference, but they would have paid for it.
Yeah. So, people don't realize that when we go to conferences, like when I went to Flutter Vikings and did all those interviews and was running around, we were running around for how long? Like 5 days, I think. We were there for the conference, and then we were there for a bit longer, which that's another funny story. It's too long to tell right now. In short, I forgot to check out of the hotel, and when they reached out to me to say, please get your stuff out of the room, I was in the middle of a fjord on a boat.
Yep.
But anyway, I mean, we dropped a couple $1,000 personally out of our pockets. Because that's, if I would have gone to Berlin, that's what it would have cost. That's probably what it did cost Danielle. I'm going to be speaking in Stockholm at Flutter and Friends, September 3rd, 4th, 5th, something like that. Flutter and Flutter Friends, look it up. But yeah, that one's that they are covering as much as they reasonably can, but we all have run events and we all do run events. It is unreasonable to expect an event to be able to give you more than about $750 US, because they just don't have it. I mean, these sponsors only give you so much money, and they're not being greedy. There's a formula. What was it? Basically, if they're going to give money to an event, they figure out that they're looking to hit about $2 per attendee. So to be financially viable, a sponsorship for $1,000 should have roughly 500 attendees, I believe. Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So if you're running an event and you want to ask sponsors for $1,000, if you don't have 500 attendees, then if they give you that $1,000, they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, because it's not financially profitable to do it otherwise. So keep that in mind if you ever want to be a speaker or something, and then you're like, well, I need you to cover my hotel and all my flights. And it's like, they just don't have it.
Nope. They covered 2 nights in my hotel.
Yeah. Yeah. Majid covered 3 for me, and he covered a bunch of other stuff too. But so the flight alone ran me $2,000. And Stockholm's going to be covering about $1,000 worth of stuff for me, which is very nice. It's very generous. It's more than I think they should. as event promoters, as an event promoter myself. But it is allowing me to go to Sweden. I've never been there, so I'm just going to say thank you a lot and offer to do anything they need, even over and above my talk. And if you are ever a speaker, remember, you are not just a speaker. You are a greeter to all the attendees. You are the person they take selfies with. You are the person who takes pictures for them. You are the person who answers questions in the food line. You are the person who hangs out after the attendees leave and empties the trash cans. If they're paying a bunch of money for you to be there, you're not getting paid to just stand there and speak for 45 minutes and then strut around like a rock star.
And back in the Pearl days, you're also the person autographing all of your books.
Yeah.
So I had that happen a lot. People would come up
and making about 10 cents per book you sell. All right.
Yeah, nothing big that way.
So two other quick personal notes before we get going.
I just want to say, I also, still continuing the social hour just for a second. I look forward to seeing you all at conferences next year. I sort of do miss that from the Pearl days, and I only had one meetup before I had my accident, and that was my first GDE meeting, and that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, so I am looking forward to coming back and hanging out with people. You know, when I got to meet Emily, that was great, so it was fun. Yeah.
Okay, two more quick little points.
I do want to get
questions.
I definitely got the questions. I just want to say one more thing super quick. In case you think, though, that Randall is not being busy, this Thursday I'm going to get to go to my first in-person Flutter Atlanta, because I just moved to Atlanta, my first Flutter Atlanta meetup. And, of course, on the list of attendees is Randall.
Yep. And
I'm
Randall
everywhere.
Randall attends and speaks remotely. Don't think he's not doing anything. Okay, so real quick before we get on to questions, some of you, a few of you, maybe two of you, have been asking me how things are going. I messed up my toe. I dislocated it, and my chiropractor put it back in. It didn't get all the way better. Short version, the x-rays said it's definitely fractured. I cannot get into any shoes. I am wearing flip-flops, and I'm waiting for a podiatry appointment. We shall see how that goes. And on another quick little note, for a very brief, short time, I got to see somebody I know on television at the All-Star game last night. It was really cool. You know, it was like they were there, and then you turn around and they're gone. But, you know, to see them even for a moment was just really cool.
Awesome.
So,
cool.
All right.
Well, we got some questions. Scott, you want to be the one to pop them up, or how do you want to do that? I don't have a process for this. I don't know what you want to do. I can try answering them, and you can try answering them.
We'll just throw them all out there. How's that? Okay, first one. Is it possible on iOS and Android to set the app language separately in the settings that users want to see in their app? How is it possible to access which app language the user will set? Well, first, I wouldn't set a language for a user.
Are you going to push the button to put it up on the screen?
Good morning.
Thank you.
I haven't finished it yet.
I'm on mine too. It's fine.
Oh man. But yeah, I'm in general, I am very loath to set a language for somebody. As possible to access. Okay, now maybe what you're talking about is access which language the user set as default. That actually is app localizations already does that. iOS and Android to set the app language separately. I'm not understanding how you mean separately, because if you have an iOS device in this hand and an Android device in this hand, and the languages are set differently in settings, that should automatically take care of that, shouldn't it? And now in an app that we're building right now, I need to have English, Spanish, and Japanese. So you put a little button on there, and what is it in the beginning? You use localizations override, I believe it is. I'll pull it up in IntelliJ, and y'all can talk about it or move on to the next question while I'm pulling this up. That's your cue to talk.
Well, maybe they're wanting to set it separate from what the default is set. The locale or whatever set in your thing, and that would be just however you're doing your localizations. You just overwrite what you've said. I mean, you have to feed that in anyway. So if that's the case, then the answer is yes. And accessing it has to be, that has to be allowable for sure. Otherwise, your localization wouldn't know how to grab the correct language. So, how is it possible is a good question, and
some Googles will tell you maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a package for sure for that somewhere. But
if only one of us could channel Simon. I'm sure Simon's like on the train now. Going, it's this. Just do this.
There's a locale class in Flutter. There's a locale class.
Okay, locale.
That's what I think. Yeah, I'm looking right now.
Not locale, but locale.
Locale, yeah, not local. Locale.
Yes.
And there's actually a page on International Flutter Apps.
Right.
Which.
Yeah, it's locale is in Material App.
Yeah.
And it is a parameter of Material App. Give me a moment here.
I
stop cam.
Page.
And actually, I'm getting a message in Slack clarifying some of this.
Yeah.
Randall, I just dropped in, or Scott, I just dropped in the private chat for us, the link to the page.
Yes. Right. And then somehow that gets up on the screen, but I'm not sure how that all works.
Okay. No, what you're talking about, I'm looking at a picture that he just posted in our Slack. And basically it's a button to override, to do a localization override.
And Simon's watching, right? So.
Yeah. But he's on a train. So who knows?
Got it.
He might be in a tunnel.
Dispatcher.instance.
Yes.
Yeah. Hang on a second.
Yeah.
I've got to pull that back up somewhere.
We should just table this to wait until Scott gets here then.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Why don't we?
Yeah, platform dispatcher.instance is how you access to get what you need.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, overriding the locale. Which of course now I am sharing the wrong window.
Blame it on the newbie if you have to.
Well, I've got it here and finally got it here in a couple seconds. So, stop screen.
Anyway,
restart screen. I'm rusty. I have been actually working on work for a while.
Yeah.
And okay, so overriding the locale right here. Overriding the locale, localization's override, as we mentioned right here. It's a factory constructor, and you can basically plug in whatever you need right here. So if you make that a variable, and if the user changes the language, basically you can use anything from an animated builder to a value notifier to provider to riverpod, so that when the user changes the language, it forces a rebuild on one of these widgets. On one of these widgets here that are above it, which will force the localization's override to rebuild, and then you can fetch this value from your state management. So that'll handle that right there. In fact, I've done it in this app that I'm working on, because I need to make sure that the ARB files and the L10N are working correctly. So you're just sitting there punching a button, bebopping between languages like crazy. So yeah, that right there, if I'm understanding you correctly, should be right. And it's internationalizing Flutter apps. That's funny. I18N? Oh, I'm sorry. I18N as opposed to L10N. I'm using L10N, but the situation's pretty much the same. So hopefully that got it. We shall see.
Anyway, I think we beat
sorry.
as much depth as we can until Simon comes in and tells us it's just this one thing over here that we've totally skipped over. So that's fine. He does that a lot. He's pretty good at stuff. Pretty good at stuff. We got some other questions we could probably handle here.
How can we implement Microsoft in-app purchases?
Of course, the week that John's not here.
Yeah,
absolutely. We're going to table this next week when John can be here.
we can try to talk to Simon when he gets here about this one, because Simon was a Windows developer for a long time. Also, John Weiss, he comes in because he still works for Microsoft. That is a really interesting question. If I had to give a wild guess, I would look at how it's done in Windows apps and then FFI.
I would see if there's anything in the pub that already does this.
That would be a good way to start.
Yeah, that's simplest.
I am not going to unstar this question. I'm going to leave it in the list, but we're going to move on, and hopefully Simon will have something when he gets here. Is there a plan for adding Flutter support for C# universal Windows applications? Okay, well, first thing we need to be clear about, we are not on the Flutter team.
Yep.
We do not work for Google. The only thing Google pays for is our flights. Sometimes when we go to Google events, they're very nice. I didn't say all the time, only sometimes. And they send us cool stuff.
Yeah.
We get sweaty.
But other than that, we're on our own. Really. So, but what I can tell you after 5 years of being in this, they are trying as hard as they can to keep things minimalistic, because they feel the SDK should only contain the things that are used everywhere. If they start branching out into all these different little forays, it's going to become massively bloated and really fragmented, and the maintenance is going to be a nightmare. That's one of the main things, is they're not trying to restrict the SDK. They're trying to keep the maintenance within something manageable. Okay, remember that they don't have, this isn't the Windows operating system. They don't have 10,000 people working on it. But yeah, and another thing too, in short, with something like a C# universal window application and working with it, that's something that the team almost certainly would say, start a package. Anything can be done, but the question is, whose responsibility is it? And something like this has nothing to do with Android, iOS, Mac, Linux. It only has to do with Windows. Therefore, it's something that's in the community's realm of responsibility. So if you want to see this happen, one of the best things to do is go into the Slack, go into the Discord, and start talking and see if you can find other people interested in the same thing. Maybe you can get 2 or 3 others to work on it and start a repo. Anybody else?
No, that covers it.
No,
I'm much we know.
All righty.
Move on.
Why aren't there many Flutter jobs in the market? I don't know where you're looking, but I have had no shortage. It's not because we're doing the show. Go ahead, Randall.
Let me answer sort of a core answer that I deliver to this, because I've noticed this in companies all over, particularly in the US, is that Flutter is mostly being adopted in the US by large companies that already had an iOS and Android team and are now looking at the savings they can do by merging, doing it all with Flutter, and then they're able to fire 50% of their people. And so they're not looking for outside new Flutter developers because they're training within. It's easier to train an Android or an iOS guy in Flutter than it is to start somebody from scratch, a junior Flutter developer, and bring them up through the chain. So a lot of companies in the US in particular that already had mobile products and are switching to Flutter won't be hiring any Flutter developers, except maybe a key architect or something. That's about it. There are green starts, though. Tons of green starts are coming up. They don't pay as well because they're not established. So they have VC requirements, things like that. So they're out there, though. I'm applying. I'm basically watching LinkedIn for everything that's in Western Hemisphere. And I'm able to get 3 or 4 rejection letters a week. So obviously there are enough to have that happen, and that's not even, don't even write me back at all. I'm getting 3 or 4 rejection letters a week. So there you go.
What is it that they have on LinkedIn? The little ready for work, open for work, open to work, whatever it's called. It puts, I think it's the green one that goes around you. And around your icon, and all kinds of recruiters and people looking to hire scan that. Believe me, you put that on yours, they'll look at your profile, they'll see you're doing Flutter, and pretty soon, you have to tell them to go away. And a lot of people are like, well, I don't want to deal with headhunters. You know what? If they weren't worth it, they wouldn't make any money. Right. If they weren't worth the job that they're doing, then they wouldn't be bringing in enough money to pay the rent and put food on the table. So they must be doing something. Right. The other thing that I noticed Randall didn't mention, and it's funny because I know you do this mostly. Randall was just talking about Flutter jobs for an employer. And the vast majority of what I know about are not jobs working for someone. They are things you can get as a freelance contract.
Right.
And even on LinkedIn, when the recruiters start beating down your door, I have a temporary contract for company X, whether it be a bank or an automotive, and I have seen them all: bank, automotive manufacturer, fintech, healthcare, sports applications. There are professional sports teams who need internal applications that the players look at, keep their own statistics and all this other stuff and their appointments and all that. Some car companies have apps that when you bring a lease back, the person who scans it in, they have to scan the number on the car, and the computer gets the information, and they have to check through the car and set the condition of it and all of that. All that's done a lot of times with a Flutter app. The vast majority of Flutter apps you're ever going to see will never be on the App Store. They are being used internally by large companies, and they're being written not by employees, but by contractors. And they're being written by contractors who have been brought in through staffing firms like VDart, like Tech Systems, like a number of others. And so if you put the available to work on your profile, those staffing companies are going to come beating down your door because the people who are the recruiters are getting paid commission.
Yeah.
This is why they're so aggressive sometimes. If they don't find somebody to fill that job, they don't get paid.
I once had a company that I once had 2 different recruiters both contact me the same week about what ended up being ultimately the same job. So this company is well known to just say, throw a job out there, and then all the intermediate people all grab on it and then start trying to fill it. And so I was having two body shops competing for me. So it was kind of fun.
You have to be careful with that. You have to be careful with that because they don't want to end up with the companies don't want to end up with fights over who they have to pay. So you do need to be a little bit careful. If you suspect that's happening, make sure you only get submitted by one.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the market for junior Flutter programmers is really weak. You really need to get down, have a portfolio, have some experience working on even, if you can get internships or something somewhere so that you've got some mileage in.
Now, there's an opening there, though, because those VCs that Randall was talking about that don't have the big budgets,
Yep.
The more senior intermediate, or the more senior and the higher intermediate Flutter developers aren't going to touch those. They're not paying enough. So that opens the door there. If you're junior, you can probably start looking there for things on LinkedIn that are, they're a startup or they're this or that. You know what? As long as you're getting paid by the hour, don't ever take a flat rate job. Do not. If the client will only do a flat rate job, wish them good luck, move on. Because
four times in the last month, I've seen equity positions as well. I can't take on those right now. I need current cash. But that's also available too. If you don't mind putting some time in to build sweat equity, that's also
that with Stream.io. Nash went on with them for part equity.
Yeah.
I'm going to disagree a little bit with you, Scott, on what you were saying. I think for some people, getting a job and getting paid and having something you can show off is got value. And so there may be times where if you, especially, if it's kind of stuff you'd be trying to learn anyway, or things like that, as long as you can define well enough what the actual end goal is, bidding by the job, you're probably going to get underpaid, but at least you're getting paid something and you're learning and you're getting out there. The only thing I would say though is if you do that, make sure that final, the success criteria is there, and and you can say this is when we're done.
And the other thing though is you need to define what you're willing to do. Mm-hmm. And what I have found is every job I have ever worked on, the requirements keep changing a third of the way through, halfway through. And it seems like the closer you get to the 3/4 mark, the faster things keep changing and deadlines keep having to be pushed. If you're working a flat rate on that, what they're doing then is they're eating into your money because it's taking longer and longer and longer, and you're not going to get paid anymore.
Yep.
So if you're going to do that, you need this ironclad that any changes are by the hour.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It definitely needs to be defined. And it needs to be a small project if you're doing that.
Yeah. Obviously. That's true. And believe me, anything that's even a small project always ends up bigger than you thought.
That's a truth. That's a truth.
But what was it? On the multiple recruiters thing for the same job, there are two that are absolutely notorious for this. And if the companies aren't doing anything wrong, they're just throwing it out there, and a whole bunch of recruiting firms are trying to fill the jobs. And it's no secret, but Huntington Bank and Toyota. So Huntington Bank out of Columbus, Ohio, and Toyota's plant in El Paso, Texas, are both just constantly looking for people. There's a churn going on for some reason. And the recruiting firms are just keep trying to fill it and fill it and fill it and fill it because those jobs are paying pretty darn good money. But for some reason they keep going through people.
I think we should move on.
Try to go for them. But anyway,
yeah.
All right. So let's take a look at something that gave me absolute nightmares. Because I had to do it from like Dart 2.12 or something. But that is migrating to null safety from a non-null safe app.
Yes.
The first thing that you need to do is buy a case of tissues because you're going to cry a lot. No, I'm kidding.
No, I mean, it's
Dart fixes a lot. But not everything. Not Dartfix, but the migration tool.
Yeah, I didn't have the migration tool at the time. Maybe that's why I have nightmares.
You do now. Thank God.
It really does a lot and identifies a lot. So yeah, and you've got to do it before you upgrade to 3, which it looks like Mona realizes that, which is good. You definitely have to do it before you go to 3. If anybody's already gone to 3, you're going to have to downgrade, I think, to do it, right? Mm-hmm. They've not done anything else for that, right?
Right. And if you do it,
3 is.
Yeah. Dart Migrate Dart Migrate goes away in 3. This is why you need to know about tools like Puro. I know FVM has been the champion for a while, but Puro is way better than FVM. So if you're going to have both Flutter, was it 3.10 that has Dart 3 in it, and Flutter 3.7, the legacy one, if you have to have them both simultaneously installed because you're migrating stuff, then go get Puro.dev. Check that out. It's an amazing tool. Way better than FEM. Way better. I'm sorry for the FEM people, but Puro does it for sure. Yeah. I should put that in the chat. Actually, I should put the link.
Yeah.
There.
So the first thing you do is you do want to run the migration tool.
Yeah.
And depending on how big your app is and what's going on, that may or may not take care of it. But this is where once again, nobody does really, but this is where I hope you've got good tests, because your tests help you know what's going on.
You jest. Truly, you jest.
I just had to do a major restructuring because of a change, and the test directory, every subdirectory, every file in it was just bleeding red. And it got to the point where it was all so annoying, because I usually look up and see if there's a red line at the top to tell me if there's a problem, and test had flagged it. I ended up grabbing the whole test folder and putting it out on the desktop. Just shoving it off to the side, because I'm going to have to finish this restructuring before I can rewrite the tests.
Well, that's sad, because the tests are supposed to protect you when you do that big refactor. So that's part of the problem. Is you really want your tests to know that your refactor works.
They basically became useless because what we did was completely change the way the data structure is done. So even just downloading the JSON and creating the objects had to be completely torn apart. All righty. Anyway, moving on. But yeah, that's Mona. One of the first things I really would say is, if you have a favorite headache medication, you at least just want to make sure you have some of it, because there's no way you're going to get around not having a headache at some point. It's
preferably
normal.
a 6-pack of it. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm just saying you might need like 3 pills.
Yeah.
Well,
in reality.
And I would also take a look at, why haven't you upgraded it yet? Because that's probably going to be a clue as to where your problems are going to be.
A couple of years. It's a long time.
And another thing to keep in mind too, it's eventually going to happen. We all know it's eventually going to happen, but they're going to make Material 3 the default. So there's another change that's coming around the corner. Don't know when exactly it's going to happen, but it's the handwriting's been on the wall for a while.
And again, you can opt out of it, but be careful doing that, because at some point they will take away. Any of these cases where you're fighting the trend of going toward what's the new way of doing it, you can do it for a little while, but it's a problem otherwise.
Oh man, and you're a new developer. All right, if you can get some help from Slack, get some help from somebody on Discord. I would go into general and ask people for help. Never send people DMs asking for help. Don't do that. It's just rude.
But Mona, I'm taking it from your name that you're a female Flutter enthusiast. You should DM me and come join the Flutter. Okay. You might be able to help you out.
When someone says DM them, then it's cool.
Yes.
Yep.
So DM me, and let me get you in the Flutteristas, and we can maybe help drill down a little bit on that and help you out.
Yeah. Double check if you're going to need somebody to sign an NDA in order to be able to help you with the code base. But yeah, because if you're a new developer and you need to tackle this situation, that this is something that gives more veteran Flutter coders some headaches sometimes.
Yeah. Can you flash
get help now?
Can you flash up our names and stuff so she could see my Twitter handle?
You know what? I just realized that wasn't there.
I know.
Why are they
You're in charge, Scott. So we're blaming you.
You know where the buttons are. I don't know where the buttons are.
Yeah, I usually
I only have one button I get to press. That's it. It's the button that makes stars.
There we go. Yeah.
Yay.
So all right,
never been taken down
on Twitter, and we can perfect, good. She saw it. We're gonna be good.
All right.
We're gonna get to the Mona.
So let's see here. And the one about Microsoft in-app purchases is still sitting in the queue. We're waiting on that. Firebase Crashalytics says this app has 104 unprocessed crashes. That's all. Upload 6 DSIM files to process them. I don't have any of those files for older versions of the app. What to do? Honestly, I'm not even sure.
You did backups, right? Don't you have your time-related backups for that?
She came in on this project, and she's working on one that she doesn't have, that hasn't been converted to null safety. So, and she's new, which means that this whole thing is older than her, so she doesn't have them. I don't think she's gonna be able to get them, and that's a problem.
Yep.
That's a problem. I mean, they're there for a reason. You can't just easily recreate them. They're created when you build it, and I wouldn't even trust necessarily the toolings of. I mean, you could try trying to figure out what version of the SDK it was and download exactly that version and build it, maybe, but I doubt it.
And you have to have the right pubspec.lock so you get the right versions of everything.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy.
No, it's and you can never run Flutter up. You can never run pub upgrade either, because that'll destroy all that.
I'd be careful before you delete anything, but I think you need to kind of start from where you are now.
Honestly, what I would do, and I've had to do this a couple of times for various reasons, I would create a new. I would change the name of the directory, the main directory of the project, to whatever it is, OLD, and I would create a new project with that same name, and I would pull the guts of lib out, drop it in there, and just about start fresh. And what that will allow you to do by starting fresh is you can possibly restart Firebase Crashalytics, for one thing, and just try to get everything fresh. It might be a bit of a stretch to recreate a whole new Firebase project, but I would start as fresh as I can. So, but I've done that a couple of times already because I thought we were going to be using one project, and then they did a change.
Yep.
You see.
Okay.
And that's a good 2 days.
This is a sad question. We should move on.
I was going to say, and among other things, keep up to date now with recent files as you go along.
Yeah. HELP is the word of the day. All right. How to separate business logic, HTTP requests, state taken out of the presentation widgets without using provider, Riverpod, or other popular libraries.
Why not use the popular libraries, please?
There are. I have seen it one time, and I wanted to choke them. I ended up not staying with this for very long because of it. But the lawyers had no idea what they were talking about. And we're freaking out about, well, you can't use any other software that we don't own the rights to. And I look at them and I'm like, well, then you can't use Flutter.
Yeah.
Well, that's an exception. Well, so are the other packages. No, they're not.
Right.
So, they sit there and want to spend a year and a half writing an app that you could have written in 6 months. But if you're going to have to do that, there are a number of different ways to do it. One of the things that you could do is use ancestor state of type. You make your app state stateful. You end up doing some
inherited widget
static methods.
Yeah.
You end up doing static methods and maybe a value notifier to force, or an animated builder to force a rebuild at the base of the tree.
In my app, I'm not using Riverpod provider or other popular libraries, so I can talk to this for sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Why are you letting me babble when you know what you're doing? I'm
trying to cut in without being too much of an interrupting there. So separating business logic out is having the widgets that handle the business logic, or not the widgets, I'm sorry, the classes that handle the business logic for sure should not be happening inside of your presentation, of your UI. Okay. And so the way that we handle it is we have something that's called like a presenter. And that actually understands how to do the UI for this type of a thing. So like, for example, if there's an API call that has to be made, it knows how to make that API call. It keeps track of whether we're busy, things like that, for that kind of stuff. And it gets injected via, and it also it knows how to get to or from however you're doing your state, whether it's a global, a global instance of a class you got set off to the side somewhere, or whether it is some other way of getting it through an inherited widget or something like that. Well, if you're doing that, then that requires the context, stuff like that. But the bottom line is that the way that we're doing it is when we are creating the new, when we're changing our route. So when you're creating your new, your new material page route, we are injecting at that point in time what you need to be able to do what you've got to do state-wise. And so that way it knows only what's there. One of the things that my hot take, I'm gonna do a blog post on it at some point, but I don't really like the provider inherited widget style way of doing a lot of the state management, because it does not, basically anybody under it could access it. And so the whole reasons of why they've invented, private and protected variables and other languages and stuff like that, the reason why they've done all of that gets a little bit defeated, because as long as I'm under it in the tree, I could actually get to it and abuse it. So I kind of prefer taking it out of the widget tree and being able to inject it some other way, so that I'm the access to how things get there. And that's not the most popular view. I'm sure I'm the only one on this panel that has that view, but that's kind of my take on that. So you can definitely do it. And so so basically I create a business logic layer, a presenter. It's not a global presenter. It's specific to the screen kind of page setup that I'm doing, but it knows how to do the HTTP request. It knows how to grab that global, kind of, if it's global or not, pull it in and put it back.
RiverPod actually is implemented close to the way you're talking about. If you do not have access to the provider that keys into the RiverPod provider container, you do not access that memory. You cannot get to that. You need access, which means you can make library local providers that nobody outside that library can touch. And that's fully supported by the system.
Absolutely. And you notice I said provider and inherited widget. I did not say RiverPod.
Yeah, you didn't say RiverPod. I know. RiverPod doesn't, right.
I'm not using RiverPod, but I did not lump that into my complaint.
I do want to say along this point, I read everything in Medium, or at least look at everything in Medium and a few other places that have tagged Dart or Flutter. And I'm seeing a trend over the last maybe 6 months, besides ChatGPT, but we're not going to talk about that right now. That people will say, "Oh, look, you don't need RiverPod or provider. Here's how I do it by hand." And then I think, and you've got a bunch of untested cases that aren't going to have corner cases managed. I mean, I'm expecting the next blog post you make to be, "Hey, look, I discovered multiplication is just repeated addition. Here, I'm going to do it by hand now." That's how silly that kind of an article is to me. It's like, why build from the bottom up again when there's already well-tested, well-documented, community-based solutions to 90% of your problems? So you can just focus on the 10% that's actually yours.
My argument to that company that was saying they want everything done by hand is you can spend a fortune on people developing something that you have all the rights to, that is going to try to do the same job that another package that is free to use, that was developed by about 40 people scattered around the world who are the best experts in this field and who have written tests for it, and that hundreds or even thousands of people have used and pointed out the problems with and fixed the problems with. You could use that for free, or you can pay a whole team for months in order to develop something that wasn't put together by the experts, that hasn't been tested by 1,000 people, and by comparison is crap. So you're a lot better off if you can.
Yeah, you should look at the RiverPod tests, how detailed Remy has been in making sure that every weird corner case has the right state transitions, and getting all that correct in the first place, but also having the tests to make sure it never regresses is just an amazing contribution that Remy has done, and the people that have worked with him on that. And people underestimate the value that's in something like RiverPod.
Mm-hmm. A couple quick things on this. I'm sorry, as far as structure goes. So I'm also trying to keep moving a little bit. Andrea has done a fantastic article on this, Code with Andrea. Pay for his course. It's great. I do not get a commission. But yeah, structure feature first or layer first. And in short, when you're doing things like layer first, I'm sorry, this is feature first. You've got, this is layer. Yeah, you've got the presentation layer, the application layer, the domain, the data. Okay, fine. But when you go feature first, okay, what you're doing is inside of a feature, you have its presentation, its application, its domain. To me, what feature organization reminds me of is Linux versus Windows. Because Linux has everything in its own little directory. And if you want to get rid of the program, you're just gone, right? It's not all entangled with the operating system, the way a lot of things are in Windows. And when you're doing layer first, and a lot of times you end up with people doing directories such as all the pages, all the widgets throughout the app, the whole app. And this is the way they were organized for a long time, was you had all the pages, then you had all the widgets, and you could reuse widgets in between pages. And it all seems to make a lot of sense, but after a while, it gets to be a real headache. So what we've been doing is you have a feature, which is like homepage, and then you put the pages in there. And if there are widgets only used by that feature, it goes into a widgets folder underneath the homepage folder. If there are widgets that are commonly used throughout different places in the app, there's another widgets folder in the lib level for those. So, or you could even create, a lot of times people create an app directory for things that are app wide, and you could even drop it in there. So there are a couple different ways to organize things. And also, I don't know if you're already aware of this or if it is even very applicable, but you're talking about how to handle your state. And the first thing to really keep in mind that's going to make your life a whole lot simpler is the difference between ephemeral state and app state. And the short version is ephemeral state is inside of a single widget.
Yeah.
If you have a member in your homepage class called color, and then you have a method that says change color, and it sends back a random color that changes the color to it, and then your page refreshes. There is no reason to be using RiverPod or Block or any other thing for this, because this is the state that is only within the page. That's ephemeral state. That is a set state problem. You just go ahead and use set state and you're done. You only start needing this stuff when you are storing variables and such outside the scope of the widget that you're working in. So really understanding this will help you to identify a lot of places where you can just use set state, and that can simplify your life tremendously.
And
that's that. Go ahead.
And I wanted to add one more small thing to the conversation we had before this part, where we're talking about whether you use a package or not. Determining whether you're going to use a package or not is if you have a tiny little piece you need, and you got and the package that does it handles a whole bunch more than that, it's probably better to go take a look at how the package does it, and you can take from it, because we've got access to the source code for all the package stuff. And so you can go find how to do that one little bitty piece and put it over. But if it's like a 75% match, why would you want to and it's popular and it's got the right people, with it. Why would you want to reinvent the wheel? Go do it. So it's like everything else. There's not a simple always answer.
Right.
Anyway, that's
no, and also branching off of that for a moment. is the whole idea of I'm a big fan of saying the single responsibility principle doesn't just apply to methods, it applies to packages. You don't want a package that tries to do everything for you, because if for some reason anything goes south with that package, your entire app is messed up because it's got all these tendrils like some kind of an alien that's got its things wrapped around your nervous system. Whereas if your package is only handling one thing, even if it's just state management, it can be replaced. Right. If something went wrong with Riverpod, there is provider. If something went wrong with provider, you could fall back on scope model. Right? They're all similar architectures. You wouldn't have to do massive changes. So that's another way of looking at that right there. All right. So next question. Yeah. Okay. I almost clicked that one again. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Danielle's looking ahead.
Anyway.
Did you win?
No, I don't. I play them, but I have to be careful not to play them when I shouldn't be playing them. That's the important thing. Yeah. So anyway. Yeah.
Look. We've got now. There are two questions that can be answered by. Oh, look! It's a Simon.
Oh, hello.
Hey.
Welcome back to the next two in the queue, Si, or three.
What? You always spoke one.
I'm thinking the next three in the queue should be you.
Oh, okay. Drop me right in.
Also, I'm turning into a pumpkin. I've been here an hour, and unfortunately,
ground running.
Fortunately, my work that I get paid for requires me, and I say fortunately because I have an Amazon Prime Day to pay for. All right, you all have fun.
Are you heading up? All right.
And hey, Simon, be sure to tell them more about FlutterCon.
Sure.
All right.
Simon Thanks, Scott. Good to see you.
Then there was three.
And there's three. That's right. It means I like to normally be able to go behind the scenes and kind of just hit and push buttons. Yeah. But I mean, I had to be. I'm on camera this entire show this time, so here we are. Luckily, I brushed my hair and it's kind of all in one good place.
When I was just jumping on there,
yeah,
I heard that you were talking about what was it? Ephemeral state, app state.
Yeah.
I just want to briefly mention something on that, which was the fact that because everything is a widget, right? That phrase, everything is a widget. You can get stuck into this state where everything's ephemeral state. Everything's stored in your widgets. And you probably don't want to do that.
Right.
Right. At some point, you might want to lift that. You might have some root of the tree somewhere, but like in a top level widget, maybe. But essentially, that is a separate tree entirely of your app state. That is separate to your widgets. The ephemeral state is very much like, imagine you got a checkbox, you want to know if it's ticked or not ticked. That's local to the scope of that, or maybe a button if it's pressed or not. That's that's the kind of state that is linked to the widget itself and not linked to your app state. So you can imagine this kind of notion of you push down a button, and then whilst it's on that push state, it updates the app state, and then it updates the display of the button. I mean, that would be ridiculous, right? Like you're now storing every little bit of your UI's interaction in your app state. So I think it's about what you want to persist versus what you don't like.
And I think it's important as a programmer to understand the notion of the life cycle of data, the time that a data is alive. Yeah. And that will tell you, really, is it just a variable inside a function? That's a really short lifetime, or is it all the way out to this needs to be persisted in a database, and everything in between? There are gradations all the way up and down that, and don't just think about I want a variable that's holding this. Think about and then how long and how many pieces need to be persisted throughout this app or between invocations of the apps or shared with other apps. And you have to think about the lifetime of a piece of data. In particular, this also helps me decide in RiverPod which chunks of app state belong together because they have a similar life cycle. They're born and died and mutate at roughly the same times. And that means that's one provider because that will have the same kind of life cycle for that. So yeah, the life cycle of data is an important notion to really understand as a programmer.
I mean, you mentioned, I think that's one of the things I think as a programmer you learn to think in the time domain.
Yeah.
Especially when you start dealing with asynchronous and multi-threading, you I think very particularly that as a developer you start thinking about things in terms of what's in front of you, as in what your app state is right now. But when you start debugging complex problems, it's about the order of events. And the time that something stays alive, if you will, something stays active, and that becomes very much a bigger picture when you're trying to have a long running application. Knowing that this thing, like especially with async, knowing that this thing returned before that thing happened and that changed that state, and before you know it, keeping it. You build your programs in such a way that you want to keep that simple. Would be the best way. It's so easy just to throw all these async tasks around, and before you know it, you're in this like mess of like asynchronous world of not knowing what happened when. And I think there's definitely streams really do help with that as well.
Yeah, but it's also nuances. Like I used to declare all my variables at the beginning of my subroutines. And now I only introduce them as I have a value for them. So midway through my subroutines, you'll see final foo equals something. And that's a change in strategy. But you start to understand you kind of want the data to spring into life with an already useful value. And it's so easy to do with languages like Dart, where you can definitely structure it like that.
We'll get back to the question in just a second. I do want to mention that roughly at this point because I think it's good for talking about programming in general. You mentioned scope there, and it is one of those other things that I think a lot of people don't understand scope or well enough to understand that you have a global scope, you have sort of member class scope, you have function scope, you then even have logical scope, as in like inside the functions, those curly braces, that is scoped. A variable declared inside that cannot be used outside. But then you can equally just define one out to define a placeholder outside a variable like a late variable or a variable that will always be set a value in case of an if and else. And it's perfectly fine for the program to understand that. And the static analysis in Dart really does do that really well. But equally enough, you can actually kind of turtles all the way down in the sense that you can actually have a function inside a function which has more logical scopes inside, that has more functions inside, that has more logical scopes inside. So there's it can get complicated. Even more complicated is when you start. I was going to mention this in my talk that I did in FlutterCon. One of the things I didn't get to talk about was lambda expressions. So this is kind of something common that people see, which is I'm going to briefly actually might as well just share something on the stream here.
Cool.
One moment. Just so
we had bets.
It's easier to talk with something on the screen than it is for visuals, right? So let me.
Did you win the pool, Daniel, or did I? Let's see. I think it was me.
Let me see if I can get this up on stream.
Yes, lambda.
Hey, look, there we go.
Lambdas are fun.
Big. It's extra big. Yeah. So like, you might have like an elevated button, right? And when you've got that on your UI stack, you've probably got like on pressed. This is a very common pattern to see, right? And say on OK pressed or something. Oh, even I know. On OK pressed. Something like this, right? And then child text.
Okay.
something I don't know, like something like you might have something like this, right? In some sort of build method, right? So let's say this is just might as well quickly complete this. There's a reason for this. For the example, it's a contrived example, but it's an example all the same. You might have something like this, right? If this is in some sort of state class, state blah, whatever, I'm not gonna fill out all the stuff because we're just doing this as a quick example, right? So you've got your sort of your class member scope here, right? Inside these brackets.
Yep.
You got function scope here. But what's interesting is, so in the member scope, if I have final, I don't know, logic equals, I don't know, blah logic. It's for creative one my naming. And then we would have that function in our blah logic class. There's an interesting thing that takes place here, which now gets to the point. So here's another way of doing this. So this is about moving your functional logic outside of the scope of your widget, separating your UI from your business logic, as someone was asking about. But what we've actually done here in doing this is every single time the build function is called, it generates an instance of a function. This is not a declaration like it is up here, like a declaration of a function. This is the instantiation of a function, which can be unclear to a lot of people, right? Sorry, Daniel, I just realized you're hidden about the comment. What's even well, I mean, that's what's even worse about this is that logic is scoped to this class outside, which means that somehow there's a hidden parameter called logic here, right? That is being passed over to the function so that it can access inside the scope of this function. So imagine this is a function like this, it's got its own scope, right? So this is passed over, and because of it's essentially an anonymous function, you've got this like hidden scoping happening, which doesn't really add up to, it's not that much in terms of expense, in terms of overhead, right? However, if you suddenly got a huge build taking place and you've got lots of these functions, that that eats up more CPU cycles per frame, and before you know it, it adds up. And it's not this, but all these things that you do that can add up to being a frame skip, right? So the more you can avoid per frame, the better. In this case, the simplest solution here is just pass the function directly as a reference, like that. To be clear, I'm not putting the brackets here because what this does is something completely different. What this is doing is running the OK press function when build takes place and putting the result in on pressed. Which is bad. Don't do that, because you'll be wondering why your button gets pressed every single time your build runs, right? Bracket away means that now you're saying I'm passing a reference to this function, which is already in scope, to the elevate button function. There's no creation of a function always, right? So sometimes it can also be helpful that you might get, let's say this was a checkbox and you have like on check changed or something, right? And on check pressed, I don't know, right? On check changed this. Normally, again, you might do something like this where you do, I don't know, you maybe like pass an index and you have some sort of index outside, right? Whatever, right? Again, you're passing the scope over, but if you can, pass the index into whatever the thing is, checkbox widget or whatever, right? If you're custom widget or whatever, right? Pass your index over into this and have it pass it back in on check changed. And in doing this, you can now again pass a direct reference, and then your on check change becomes index, right? So now in the checkbox, this is like my custom checkbox, whatever, right? And in this widget, when it calls the on check change, it passes the index parameter it was given to that function. So it achieves the same thing, but the point here is you've not had to declare these anonymous lambda expressions everywhere, and you're being correct. That was all I was going to say. It's something that I didn't get to talk in my talk. Just reminded me.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you didn't even address the type of when that one function where you're doing on pressed, and then you had to evaluate a function. That function could have returned a function that would be your on pressed.
Oh God. Second order functions. That also is also really helpful. But again, it's about now you've got you're sort of 2 layers deep in that hierarchy. And the point here is they have their reasons, right? You have a lot of those lambda expressions have a reason because you're trying to literally break scope on purpose. You're sort of injecting an outside scope into some function that you're then passing over. But if you can get, if it's your custom widgets, obviously if the widget that you're using doesn't support that, then you can't do it. But if it's your widgets, try it the other way and save yourself a few cycles.
Yeah. I will tell you a practical reason for doing what I just said, because I've actually done it in production, which is have a function that either returns the function that on press should be or null, depending on state of something else. So you have a function that returns a function or null.
Just to briefly explain, I'm going to take this back in a second.
No, you don't have to explain it. I was just
no. I just want to explain what you're talking about. This can be like generate on pressed.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. Yeah. And then generate on pressed returns a
either null.
You could. I mean, it can be a void callback.
Void callback question mark. Yeah.
Would be the best sort of thing. And then here, which is really weird, is you do return like this, right? And then you can say like print pressed, right? So what we're actually doing here is so you could do some magic logic here to sort of generate whatever you want to use inside the function, and then you're returning. So basically, you're a function that returns a function that is then being used on. But
to be clear, what Randall was describing is making the function a void callback question mark, so that you could actually disable the button. For
example. You can also do that as well, right? So you can disable.
Right. You can return. Yeah, that's very good.
Not allowed. Not allowed. Return null.
You're promoted now. You're the senior. You're on senior staff now, so you can jump in anytime with us. correct us. You're allowed to correct Simon now.
And the one other thing, I've never been afraid to do that. The opportunities are not often. The opportunities are not often, but I've never been afraid to do that.
Right. Indeed.
The other thing, though, that I would mention here, just as just a random good Flutter technique, is that's why we actually type our variables, though, because if you have something that's a var and it's not typed, and for that function you put the open and close parens, that's going to compile just fine. It's going to have a runtime blow up for you if it's not, if it wasn't intended to be.
Yeah.
So what? Yeah, again, that's like this thing down here, right? If this wasn't a void, then you. The other thing I really hate is when people generate functions that don't have a return type. Yeah. Because another thing they don't realize what's actually happening here is this is the same as doing this and putting dynamic.
Exactly.
Which also means by accident you can actually put a return statement in your function that returns a value, right? That's completely valid. And it has some unintended side effect. Whereas if it's void, you're explicitly saying, I do not want to return a value. And if I was to put these two statements, would be errors. I wouldn't have to compile because you're returning a value to void, which is not a value, right? Sorry, just throwing that out there for everyone. Right, should we go on with more questions? Well, where are we on? We got to start questions. Next one. Next question.
Yeah, this is what we saved for you because we had no clue.
Okay. How can we implement Microsoft in-app purchase in Flutter Windows app? Make a plugin. It's the same with any of the Flutter pieces. So there is documentation on the Flutter website, and I'll get you the link for it, about building platform specific behaviors. And let me just dig that out briefly. So I will share that actually. Stop. Share. I think that's the one. We'll find out. See if I can. So are we getting that?
Yeah, we're seeing it.
Maybe make it a tad bigger, like that. Enhance.
Yes.
So yeah, if you just go to the Flutter page documentation over here on the left, you've got platform integration. This is where you want to live when you're doing plugins, right? And as you can see, Windows, building a Windows app, there's a bunch of stuff around that. But really, what you're looking for is writing platform-specific code. And this section goes through how it works. You can see diagrams that everything called a method channel. And you write, like, it's just saying explain iOS, and Android has an example, but this is Windows, right, as well. And then you use a method channel to communicate to your C#, your C++, your whatever you want inside. I think it's C++ by default for Windows, but you could put other modules and other stuff in there and actually communicate over a method channel to make those calls. And it does explain it in here, what you're going to get at the end of it in the standard library. And yeah, there's a guide in here and examples. And although this is directed towards iOS and Android as a guide, it does actually make the same for Windows. Oh, did I just miss that? There you go. Look, add a Windows platform. There you go. Step 5. And it shows you here the difference of what you need to change. Here's a method channel. Here's how you do it in C++. And here's how you get your battery level from Windows and then send it back or whatever. So, yeah, this is basically the section that you want to take a look at. When it comes to in-app purchase specific behavior, I don't know what that is on Windows or how that even works, but you should just be able to call and add the libraries to your to the Windows folder inside your Flutter project, and then call those. So, good luck. I'd like to know what you comes of it, and if you make a nice little package for it, not just do it in your app. If you make a nice package, put it on the app, put it on the pub.dev for everyone else.
I just asked Bard, what's the sequence of instructions that Harrison Ford's character gives to the screen viewer at Blade Runner, and it actually gave me the whole details. Enhance, 224 to 176. Enhance, stop. Move in, stop. Pull out. Track right, stop. Center and pull back, stop.
ChatGPT knows everything.
But it's like the whole thing. Bard knows everything. This is Bard.
Oh, okay.
Might as well promote the home team. I know, yeah, you can use it, but not the rest of the EU. Right? That's pretty handy.
Should we be using it then?
Yeah.
Right. What's next?
Okay.
Christian, sorry. Please tell me about the default process of migration old SDK to latest SDK.
Flutter upgrade.
I heard you guys talking. Was this one you guys were already talking about?
No,
this is a different question.
And I suspect he's talking about from something really old, but my flippant answer is Flutter upgrade. That's the default process.
I mean, I think I would say you should go look at the breaking changes page on the site and the release notes on Flutter, so you have an idea about what you're trying to tackle along the way. If you're going from Dart 1 from a dynamically typed to a Dart 2 strongly typed, it's that old, the project, again, I don't know what you're dealing with, then yeah, you're going to have a hard time. However, you've got a good learning experience there, that's for sure. As we said, migrate. You got null safety as the next thing above that, which is a big change. Yeah. And I think you've covered it already, so I won't cover that again. And I think, I think you said about there's like FEM and the other tools. What's it called?
Puro,
that's the one.
Puro.
That allows you basically to have 2 versions of the SDK. So you can have your old one and the latest one, or Dart 3. And then you can use some of the things like Dart Migrate and things to actually help migrate some of your code. But strictly speaking, you should just do the thing, migrate it over. So use the latest, download the latest SDK, try and open up your project, let Dart analyze, and then try and use Dart Fix and Flutter Fix to try and do the major points. Add the Flutter lints because they might not even exist in your project. And then look at your Dart analysis tab in your IDE and go, okay, I'm going to go through a step by step and fix every single issue.
2,000 errors.
I mean, the thing is, a lot of them are auto fixable, so that's great. And the ones that aren't, we're going to require manual intervention because they're going to require things like a logical behavioral change, which requires the programmer to make the choice. AI has not beat us to that one yet. Right, moving on.
Yep. Yeah. Hey, you got here late, but we might be running out of time for questions. I don't know how much longer you want to run with questions.
I'm good to run for a bit. So it's up to you who wants to stick around.
Okay, I can stick around for a little while, but Danielle may have a timeout here. But we'll keep going until she gets.
Who's playing the next question?
Oh, I guess I'm taking the next question. I want to use FP Dart with stream data like Firestore Snapshot, but Task either does not support try-catch stream. So I convert to future and use stream subscription. Is there a better way? No, not at the moment. Sandro there is an issue in the FP Dart repo that talks about how to properly handle streams in a functional programming environment. In the meanwhile, you kind of have to convert it out. Kind of similar to how we do that in RiverPod, where we basically drop a stream in and turn it into just a series of events. So no, there's no clean way yet that Sandro has come up with, and he's a pretty clever dude. So about how to deal with streams in the light of everything else that's there in the types. There are some other languages like Haskell and stuff that have streams and have a model for how to do that with functional programming, but they're not a very clean fit quite yet. But hey, he's smart. He'll figure it out. He's done everything so far, doing some amazing work already. FP Dart 1.0 is right around the corner, and it supports Dart 3 out of the box. And that's part of why he hasn't released it yet, because he still wants to get all that fine-tuned before he lets it go.
Nice.
Yep.
What's next?
This was from earlier.
Oh, there you go.
When you were on the train? When you're already on the train, you're still
I was trying to type on the train. I'm like, I'll press enter by mistake. I'll just put .locale. So, wonderful. As long as it sounds wrong. Yeah. So you get the list of. This was about like how do you get the users' preferences of locale, and the answer is this. This is where it is. It used to be on Window, global called Window. That's now gone. This is ready for multi-window. So Platform Dispatcher is like the base piece that connects to the platform now. And this is where you get like the list of locales, and there's you might have a preference of like 5 locales. So if the app doesn't support the first one, it can try the second one, it can try the third one, and so on. So yeah, there you go. Next, I guess.
I don't want my Firebase chat app to reload the whole chat when I reconnect to the internet. I only wanted to update new data without reloading the whole chats. Couple ways you have to think about this. One, make sure you have something like a RiverPod provider that's holding the current state so far so that it lives between widgets and handles that. The other is ultimately you're sort of doing paging. So you need to use the logic that you use with paging. Like I already have items 1 through 50. I don't want to fetch those again. I want to start at 51. So you need to work out how you're going to do that with your data set. You might be just listen to a stream, and then when you go off the internet for a while and back on, and the stream just continues. That's possible. For some, I think Firebase can do that. But it's going to depend on your back end and depend on your strategy of holding the data and all that. Okay, Simon, you can give the right answer now.
No, I think you hit on the head. I think it's kind of interesting that people. I see this quite a lot with Firebase stuff, because I think that the general gist of Firebase is here we get you up and going immediately. Here's the Firebase UI package that does this thing. We connect straight to the database. Here's the database. We do persistence for you. We do this. We do that. And as soon as you go, I want to do this specific thing that Firebase doesn't support, or it's not easy to achieve with Firebase, then suddenly you're kind of out of luck, right? So it's not that Firebase, you can't continue to use Firebase, but you need to take a step back, and that is don't use Firebase directly in your front end of your app. Put it to the back end. And what you're trying to do is add a caching layer in between, what we call a repository normally. And so the idea is that whenever that snapshot that you get from Firestore comes back, it gets a series of documents. You take the data from those documents, you put them into your own model objects that can be serialized in JSON. You then save them to disk or put them in memory. And then when that next loads, you then load that JSON file from disk, loading those model objects back into memory. And whenever you then make a request for the latest chat messages or whatever, you're requesting it from that point that you've got saved already, that ID of the last item onwards. So that way, you don't have to re-download it, your chat message every single time, and they're immediately there, especially if you're offline. So there is great talks about this. This is a known quantity. It has been known for a long time on mobile with bad connections and everything else. It's called offline first behavior. And there's great talks from Salee. I know that Salee did one offline first at DroidCon London. I think Majid did one. I mean, there's many people in the community that have done great offline first talks on Flutter, and there's just huge amounts of articles and information online. So I think go look up the term offline first, and that's kind of where you want to go. But the general gist of it is that you've done exactly what you said here. You only want to download the new data without reloading it. So you say, download it once, store it, you load on what's stored, and then when you request the new data, you can request it with a query that say start at, and you say start at and whatever the last document ID that you received was. You'll carry on from there. Hope that helps.
Yeah, hope that helps.
What is the best way to update the parent widget when the child constraints change? E.g., I have a layout builder and I want to call parent set state on certain constraint.
I don't like that. I mean,
this is a messy thing you're doing here.
The answer for upgrading constraints is you pass in a method that can do that. But if you're changing based on a layout builder, that smells to me like some sort of infinite loop happening. If it's changing things, it's just keeping going back and forth.
I kind of want to, I kind of understand the questioners, what they're trying to achieve here, because sometimes you can approach things with the UI and you're approaching them probably the wrong way. I suspect the question might be better suited to removing the layout builder and probably use intrinsic width and intrinsic height, which basically means you're asking the child for its actual size, and then the parent can react to that. You can intrinsic widths and heights don't work with layout builder as well. So just let you know that now. That's why I say remove it. But maybe you can ask again with maybe a bit more detail or a bit of an explanation. We can help a bit more.
There's always the ultimate solution for layout issues, and that's boxy. We refer to it from time to time. It can do everything. It's the Swiss Army knife of layout. I mean, it's overkill for almost everything. But
to be honest, solving your problem here is probably, I'd say you could probably solve this without your layout builder and do all this kind of stuff with the child constraints. And what you're probably looking for is a custom single child layout.
Yeah.
That's the widget. It's called custom single child layout. I think
while you're looking that up, I'm going to just call it 5 more minutes for questions, and then we're going to cut off, because that way Simon and I can get out of here in some reasonable time. 5 more minutes.
5 more minutes for me being on the call. So.
Yeah, 5 minutes for her, and it's just us and trying to finish the queue.
So there you go. A widget that defers the layout of its single child to a delegate that can determine layout constraints for the child and can decide where to position the child. And this is the thing that the parent size cannot depend on the child size, which may or may not be opposing to the constraints you're trying to achieve. Sorry, Daniel. All right. Next
I'm
question.
Sorry, I'm just having fun. Sorry.
According to a recent Stack Overflow survey, why is Dart Flutter high up on the chart? And why is the Flutter framework higher up on the chart than Dart itself?
Because people understand Flutter. They don't necessarily need Dart for anything that's not Flutter. So
the other side of this is just what's tagged, right? And there's Flutter questions. And even though they're using Dart, the language, they don't tag it with Dart. They're tagging it with Flutter.
Right.
I also noticed that, I can't remember some of the results in the Stack Overflow survey weren't that favorable to Dart and Flutter, but knowing how the trajectory of the community, the pulse of the community, I'd say that's also down to the fact that a lot of people haven't filled it out. I didn't fill it out. A lot of people I know didn't fill out the Stack Overflow survey. Did you, Randall? I mean, we use Stack Overflow, but
I think that I filled out one, but it was just like one, and there's been like 4.
I really got to get so the example is this is also the Flutter survey.
Yeah.
That's also been sent out recently, and I haven't filled that out either. And it seems to drop off my chart. But if we don't feedback on things, and this is like an call to action for the community, if we don't feedback on these things, then they don't know what to change or how to change things, right? So if you want to contribute to the community or contribute to the future of Flutter and Dart, fill out the surveys. For Flutter
this is like
Stack Overflow.
This is like in the 90s when there were surveying companies were starting to get weirder and weirder results from doing surveys because they were using phones calling people at home at 6 p.m. or something. And it's like the number of people for whom that even had a home phone now instead of a cell phone starting in those days is like it totally biased all the results.
I was going to say the other side of that is you get sometimes you don't realize, but you somehow get a skewed result then in terms of that might be that people are trying to get you off the phone as soon as possible. It's the evening, they want to get back to whatever they were doing.
Yeah.
So they're just going to answer the positives or whatever that you want to get you off the phone. And like before you know it, you've now got skewed survey results, right? So
no, I don't use that. No, I don't use that. Give me an answer. Sorry. No, I don't use that.
And I do think that we've all been involved in conversations where someone's like, I'm going to do this. And we're like, why would you want to do that? And it has to do with surveys and whatnot. And they've taken a look and these are the answers they've gotten back. So, I mean, that's, once again, if you don't, it's like voting. If you don't vote, you don't really have a good reason to complain at that point.
All right. Next question. Oh, from our Christian. I met Christian at FlutterCon. Cool.
Oh, then did I?
Yeah, he was there. You missed him, Danielle. Sorry.
I don't know if I did or not. There's no picture on the thing, so I might have. I don't know.
How about a live coding system for down years? Sounds very interesting. Even if you end up using a package.
Okay.
What was this on?
This had to do with my kind of take on how to do some of the state stuff, where I'm injecting a presenter that business logic layer. I inject basically someone that contains that in when I'm doing my routing. So only the widgets that need that part of the code have access to that part of the code. We had a discussion on that. Right now, I think there's probably a little more setup that would be required in understanding and stuff. That's useful. But I mean, I'd love to do something like that. Maybe I can do something on my YouTube channel and kind of explain part of that.
Cool. You want to post the link to your YouTube channel in the chat?
Not this week.
Or something.
Not this week.
Okay.
I've been very inactive lately, and I need to get back more actively. Although people can find it if they just watch my remarks on the when I'm commenting in the chat. It's kind of my channel.
There's my YouTube channel. There's my YouTube channel.
Yeah,
I got some cool Dart free stuff in there, so go check it out.
All right, next. Thoughts on Eric Seidel's approach to making co-push store policy compliant? I'm going to throw my hands up and say I didn't get to see his talk in FlutterCon. I didn't either. Not seen any of it, so I can't comment.
I'm now on.
I think my excuse was better. As to why I didn't see
What's yours? Why? Because you were talking.
I was going to say my excuse is better of missing his talk because I had to go to the hospital. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm on the Shorebird Discord now, and I'm watching a lot of the conversation going back and forth. And now that I understand more about technology, it's still, until it's written into Apple App Store policy, it's not likely to be bankable yet. It's not likely that they can continue forward with this. I'd be anxious to see that because I know that some React Native things have been kicked out for being able to be side-loaded, code pushed. I know that we had a Squeak application that's a Smalltalk runner that was not allowed by the App Store because you could load Smalltalk code directly from the net and change the behavior of what you saw on the screen. And they didn't like that.
It has changed though. I mean, like I know a lot of web apps, they're fine with it. So I don't know. Anyway. Let's keep going.
Yep.
Hopefully, Christian.
Do we need to say bye to Danielle here or not?
Danielle, you ready to go?
I'll stay for the next question because I actually put an answer in Slack on that.
Oh, okay.
Okay. How many different Dash plushes are there? I see 3 different versions. Yeah, there are 3 different versions. There you go. You have the original Dash with the dark tail and the dark front. Then you have the secondary Dash with the one that came out afterwards, the light front and the light tail. These are large ones. You can see how big this is. Now, put your hand above yours, Randall. Come on top of it, you mean? Come on. See how big my hand is? Like so. You had the mini Dash, which is the one that Randall had. Daniel's showing the difference in size.
Bigger hand. There, look.
And there's a mini Dash that came out.
Right.
I don't believe they're making the big ones anymore, and they're only the mini Dashes now.
Yeah, that FlutterCon, the big ones were there. I had posted in Slack though. It looks like a kind of a cool page that was talking about the history of Dashes. I mean, on the comment here, I'll drop in private chat though. Here, let me drop in the private chat. And anyway, the one thing I want to say is in there is a link to the talk that Shams gave on when they first made it, and that's well worth watching. A little bit of an idea is that they said
this isn't on the official Flutter website then.
So,
it is. It's on the official Flutter website. Let me post that. Let me bring this link up in chat for everyone. So here is the official Flutter website link, and I'm going to bring it up on stream because it's cool. Right, here it is. Ta-da!
Yeah.
So yeah, who's Dash? You know, how did it get started?
Yeah.
How did it all start? So this is linked to the Dart conference or something. I don't know. I'm gonna.
Wow.
There she is.
Yeah, that's Champs.
A
very fun person.
And there's the video. Yeah.
Yeah, and please watch the video. It's well worth watching. Yeah. And you can see what basically the first kind of prototype, I guess you'd call it, was.
There you go. Dash 2, Dash 2.1. Yeah. So okay, you got Dash 1. Oh, you got Dash 1, you got Dash 2, and then Dash 2.
Yep.
Oh yeah, this was at Flutter Interact. Yeah.
And just for anybody who doesn't know, we're a bunch of engineers. So everybody had that thing rigged where there were people standing on one side and the other side and watching and telling the person exactly when to drop and coming down and getting it. It was definitely interesting that way.
Nice.
So
cool. Yeah, that's linked in the chat for anyone that wants to go there and take a look.
And I think I do need to go now. Thanks everybody. And
and we'll see you again soon, hopefully.
Yeah. And she can do her live coding. That'll be fun. All right, let's look at what we got left here.
Put a dash on the screen. There you go. We got a little dash.
Oh, nice! Look at that. Dash away. Dash away.
There you go. Right, next question.
Any thoughts on supplying conditional arguments if the param is null? Then thoughts on that. There is a Dart. There was a proposal in the patterns and records and destructuring specification that addressed that, how patterns and destructuring look a lot like the argument list, both the actual list and the formal list for records, and how it would be interesting if there was some sort of mapping there, and except that they didn't have a way of doing requireds and default values yet. And they didn't want to have to create all of that syntax all at once. So maybe in the future, when we can figure out how to have a record that has a required and a default value template, we can start talking about that being the formal parameter list and passing a record into it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about this. There's a way that Python deals with this, and you get a special keyword called KWArgs.
Right.
And what it basically is.
Python. Yeah, Python's untyped though, so you just get a bag.
But bear with me. Hang on. What I'm trying to say is, inside your constructor or your initializer for your class, you get this KW-args, which is basically a map of your parameters, right? Of your key and value pairs that have been passed into you. And what's kind of nice about its behavior is that you can pass that over and it will destructure it back into parameters, right? So you can pass a map as the parameters to a constructor. I can't remember if it's like dot or triple dot or something. And basically it will destructure, essentially disassemble that map and pass the key and value pairs over to the appropriate parameters for the object, which means you can then do define a map with conditionals in it like this, and it have the same behavior. And what you're essentially doing is like curly braces dot essentially, and then having like, so there might be something in the future where that is workable, because that's already part of the standard, the conditionals inside of maps and lists.
Yeah, we already have part of the mechanism in place because of no such method. So we do have an invocation type. And so we do have some structure in there. It's just not clean syntax for how to construct one of those arbitrarily and how to use one of those arbitrarily. But there already is the technology in the no such method callbacks that have this invocation callback back from when we had mirrors. But this is that without mirrors.
So I'm not going to start talking about this too much, because there's a great topic of a lot of great people talking about this on the GitHub. So if you go to the Dart language funnel, you'll find the reference material for this, I'm sure, from there. However, I do like the idea, and I like the idea because it's very often that you want to conditionally override a parameter, and then not have to deal with its default. So if you override a parameter like this, you need to have the else condition to supply default value, right? Otherwise, you're supplying null, right? And you don't have nullable parameters really a lot of times. So it's that kind of notion of, I may want to override a parameter. How do I do that? And right now, the annoying thing you have to do is you can do like a ternary if, but then you have to provide the else condition to that, or have it nullable, which again is not desirable either. So it works though for the time being. And you're obviously the problem with doing that. Sorry, let's be clear. The problem with doing that default value is more about the fact that you then have to copy the default value from your superclass, right? And then that also gets, if you change it there, you have to change it in other places, and it's not desirable either. So, but I tell you what, you compare the language to where it was, and it's a lot better. And you compare it to other languages, still better. So we can complain about these things, but it's like it's awesome as it is, right?
Yes, and thank goodness Dart doesn't have everything that everybody liked from every other language already.
The other thing to say is you can lift up in this example here, you can lift up your conditional to be outside of the constructor's parameters into essentially doing, if value does not equal null, then do my widget with the 2 parameters, else my widget with 1 parameter.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And you've achieved the same thing. And it's very much explicit in its description of what it's doing. And that's probably easier to read from a programmatic standpoint as well. You're constructing one widget with this set of parameters, or if this value is set to not equal set to null, or you're setting it with another value. So anyway, right.
Like an example, it would be like colors. There's colors from ARGBO and colors from RGBY or whatever. And so the name constructors give you different takes on what the arguments are going to be.
That's a good point. I did think about that. Yeah, we have name constructors that you can specify different sets of parameters, and then in your initializer, you can default, you do : parameter 1 equals null or whatever for the else condition, and it kind of solves this problem, right? Yeah. There's a lot of different things you can do. If you use the named constructors as an override, you can super them onto the subclass and actually still maintain the default value. So that's also a benefit as well.
Cool. All right.
Next. I learned sizes go up, constraints go down, so no back and forth. How does layout work when a column containing text spacer than text?
It works. It's great.
So the constraint okay, so let's say this is a column with a text widget, then a spacer, which pushes out the content, and another text widget. So it's the phrase is constraints go down, sizes go up, parent sets position. That's the mantra of layout in Flutter, and it works fine in that. I think the problem here is you're forgetting that constraints can be unbounded. So when you come to a column, the height constraint is unconstrained. So that text widget is given a width, maybe, because it depends on how you do your cross-axis alignment. But let's say it's set to stretch, it's given a width, but no height, right? And it's given a max height of whatever the column's max height is. Depends on the constraints coming down. And then the next one, now spacer is what's called an expanded. If you go look at the layout algorithm of column, it then goes and lays out the other text widget first. And this is about giving it constraints and getting its size. It hasn't given its position yet, right? So you can do all the text. In this case, it does the first text widget, then the second text widget during layout. Then it works out what the remaining space is and allocates it evenly based on flex to the remaining expanded, which is what the spacer is. So flex of 1, basically, and expanded with the flex of 1. This means that the remaining space in the vertical column is given to that. And then it lays them out. So the constraints have gone down to the children. The sizes come back from those children and then the parent sets the position of the children. So I
think the key there also, I think you may have sort of touched on this, but I want to make sure this is explicit, is that a column or a row actually has two different kinds of children. It has children's where sort of the normal layout happens and it passes down constraints, gets back a size, but it also notes specially spacer, expanded, flexible, and those guys that participate in the flex protocol. And these are widgets that, besides giving back a constraint of some or a size of some kind, it also says, and I'm a flex number 2. And so then it takes all those flex values and it uses that to allocate space proportioned to those flex values. And that whole flex protocol is present especially in column and row and participates with certain other classes only.
In the docs, I'm just looking at here, we explained it. And then if you go further down, the bit you're looking at is troubleshooting. And if we go down, one common reason this happens is column has been placed in another column. Where is it? When a column is lays out its non-flex children, those that have neither expanded nor flexible around it, it gives them unbounded constraints so that it can determine their own dimension. Passing unbounded constraints usually signals the charge should shrink wrap its contents. I think it's talking about particularly about the layout algorithm. Here we go. Each lays out each child with null on 0 flex factor that are not expanded with an unbounded vertical constraint and the incoming horizontal constraint based on cross-axis alignment. Divide the remaining space vertically amongst the children with a flex of non-zero, and then lay them out accordingly. Laid out the remaining children. Width, height, blah blah blah. Yeah. Basically,
you can tell a programmer wrote that text and not a technical writer.
So I think we were talking about. I mean, we've spoken about this a few times, and it's kind of difficult, right? So reference material is reference material, and I think you have to be very. I think it's a bit like try and read legal documents. And you're like the phrases and the way they word things. You're just like, what? Who wrote this? This is not English. This is like, this is so convoluted, right? But in the legal world, that makes sense. Now, the same comes with programming reference material. There's a way that you have to write it to be explicit about what happens when. And the problem with that is it makes it harder to read for the layman, as it were, for the beginner. So at some point you have to make that kind of judgment call between the two, and that's where the documentation explicitly lays it out always as reference material, but then there's also these like little guides and things that are attached. It's like the videos and other sort of English text written information alongside it to help. But again, like you're still always going to need that reference material so you know how it behaves exactly.
Yes, this is like the first 4 years of my salaried career. I was a tech writer. That was the title. I was a programmer who was writing text for a living, and I learned this.
All programmers do.
Yeah, I learned this gap between programmer speak and human speak. Yeah. And so I learned to translate that, though. And part of it is that you need to understand the common terms of the reader. So you need to know how to speak in their world. And that really, once we started understanding that, or I started learning how to do that from my peers there, it was much easier to understand. Oh, I have to write it from their perspective. And this is why specs don't work very well as user manuals, because a user manual needs to be in the space of the user, the things the user would do. And a spec is horrible at that.
I was going to say a good example of that is like programmers using the terms default, right? Or implicit, or explicit, or immutable and mutable, right? Like these are terms that don't have, you just don't put in common writing, right? But they have a meaning in terms. It's very much like jargon or lingo in any industry, right? Like they'll say phrases or acronyms that would mean nothing to anyone that's outside the industry, but they mean something specific in that industry. Like us talking about patterns and going, oh, it's the provider pattern, or it's the visitor pattern, or whatever, right?
And the problem is there's pockets even of that language. Like the first time I saw the word arity, and I went, what the hell are they talking about? Arity. What is the arity of a function? Anyway. There are words like that.
I mean,
I still don't understand monad very well. I'm kind of finally understanding what monad means.
I think there's oh God, don't stop. It's kind of interesting. Like you look at computer science, and there's a lot of this kind of stuff. And I think the problem here is, I think there's a reason why patterns. I think we've said about this before, but the reason why patterns I think are so popular is that you need a way of describing purpose to someone else. And if it's a complex topic or some sort of complex, let's say, behavior, for want of a better word, then you need some way of instead of just describing that behavior every single time you want to talk about it, you give it a name, right? And it's the same thing, like for anything like you might be doing, like we just said, lambda expression, right? Like that is a name given to that thing so that you can describe it rather than going, okay, I want to make an anonymous function. Again, using even more words, anonymous function. Each time the build method is called, I can say like, oh, using the lambda during build, right? And
it's a human macro.
Yeah,
it expands in the listener's mind to what it actually all is, but we don't have to keep using it. That's what jargon literally.
Yeah, it's literally shorthand jargon. Yeah. All right. Next question.
Come on. Yes.
How many functions and classes should be in one file? As many as they need to be.
7.
I've seen so many things like, oh, it should be 600 lines of this and that. The problem is one line is not equal to the next. I mean, how many lines do you have with just single brackets in them when you're doing UI code, right? To have the correct sort of.
I have some guidelines. I don't like a function to be longer than a page. I like to be able to see the open to close curly bracket in a given function. And if it gets longer than that, it's probably doing 3 or 4 things in sequence. And those can all be brought out as separate functions, refactored out by the IDE or by hand. And I think it makes more sense then, because then you have smaller testable chunks as well. If you have a 500 line subroutine, you cannot test just part of that behavior. And so you won't be able to write tests that do that. And so it's good to break that stuff up.
I think I don't really have a hard and fast rule to like how many lines or how big something should be. I think it depends on what you're doing. Like, but I do agree. Like, I think when you break up functions, you need to have a reason to break up a function. From my experience, like if you're using repeating code, that's a function, right? There's a reason to sort of break that up and go, okay, now I'm going to call that 5 times, right? Or if you're doing some sort of pattern of, logical behavior in a function, they go, oh, I'm only changing one parameter, or maybe I should do a for loop instead, or break that out in a function and call that, and that makes logical sense. And again, example, this is also testing, right? That, okay, I need to be able to see if this specific piece of logic is working. Okay, I'll bring it into a function, now I can call that function during a test case and make that make sense.
And it's also like the fact that you can put a function inside another function almost always is the wrong thing to do, but not always. Almost always, because it's like then there's no way to kind of poke at that to see if it's working properly, because it has to be in this other context to even exist and live and be testable.
The other thing you can do to make your functions testable is to use second order functions instead.
Yeah.
We just spoke about that, but basically it means that you make a function that returns a function,
right?
But that can be testable, right? So you can test to make sure the inputs give you the right function on the output, or the function's behavior on the output is correct, and then you can then call that within your function to produce the function that you require. This is really too complicated, but anyway.
Yeah, but one other thing on this though is not only is there length that's interesting, there's also width. I know so many people complain about the 80 character thing, but generally the people that complain about that are starting to indent 15 levels deep in their widget constructors, and it's like I can't understand anymore where I am on a page when we're this deeply nested in widgets. This whole thing is the left sidebar. Pull it out, make it the left sidebar as a separate widget. All of a sudden, you're now indented 5 layers fewer.
That's another thing.
That, I think, is where people are coming up against this 80 character column, is because we do end up nesting stuff a lot, but we don't have to go down very far before we can start refactoring it out.
It's nothing I see all the time. I'm like, pull it out into a widget. Yeah. Like, because the problem you've got is when that build method calls, it calls all of those constructors, right? As soon as you put it out into a widget, you've now got a caching sort of layer there, and you go, oh, I'm going to call these constructors. Oh, that hasn't changed. Well, it hasn't been rebuilt then. Like, you don't have to call the constructors again. So there's that. I will mention. I just was trying to remember. Let me bring this up on stream. Yeah. So I keep saying second order functions. The term is high order function officially, but whatever. But yeah, no, there's a whole page. I put the link in the chat here if anyone wants to go read about it in the sense. But yeah, like a function that returns a function, basically, right? There's lots of ways of different languages of doing these things. Do we have a Dart example? Oh, we do. There you go. Look, someone's put Dart example.
Same examples, all the other languages, so it doesn't even favor Dart.
Returns a function that returns a function. That's not complicated at all.
No.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. So you talked about like how many. So kind of just you're talking about function. How many classes? I don't see a class is just a class is a group of behavior and state. Like if I've got a good example of this, if you've got state for widget, now you have 2 classes in your file, right? You've got your widget and then you've got your state class. But would I separate those into 2 files because I can only have 1 file per class? No, of course you wouldn't. And I think putting in some arbitrary thing and going, oh, I can only ever have 3 classes in a file or 4 classes in the file, and if I'm ever above that, I should separate the file. It's like, but why? No. You separate off when you feel like it should be separated, right? When you look at that and go, okay, that's a bit long. It's got a bad code smell to me. I think, do you know what? I think I'm going to put into practice that I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have one widget definition and all the stuff to do that widget in 1 file. So you might have like a good example of this is, let's say you did a custom checkbox. You might have a widget class for your checkbox. You have your state class to manage the state, and then inside your stateful widget, you return back a custom paint, which does the painting stuff. Now you've got a delegate class that does your custom painting. I'm going to put that all in the same file, right? I'm not going to go make separate files for that because they're all determined. They're all sort of part of the same thing. I'm never going to use that paint outside of this file, outside of this class. I can make it private as well. Underscore.
I've been advocating for a long time that I'm putting in Riverpod, I'm putting the provider and the notifier and also the model class that they're holding all in the same file, because you edit those all kind of back and forth together. But Remy actually taught me an extra trick. If you have a view for this, like this is a detail of a invoice or something, if you have a common view that always needs to refer to this provider, you might as well put that view in there too. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because then really I just have one file for app state that knows how to paint itself. And it really simplifies the logic. And then I have these wonderful silos of, well, here's app state that knows how to paint itself in that kind of a form. Here's that. And you can get weird with that, but it does. These people that like say, oh, all the views have to be over here, then all the services all have to be over there, and all of the repos have to be. It's like, no, sometimes there's just app state, and here's a chunk of app state.
Yeah, I mean, unless it's the same thing about, like, think about. I think I'd say to the questioner, think about when you know that you need to make a function when you repeat something, right, or when you use it multiple places.
Yeah. Right.
Break out the class into a separate file when you need to. Like, suddenly let's say I need to reuse this bunch of like UI. I'm going to make a widget out of that UI. I'm going to stick it in a separate file so I can reuse it in multiple other widgets that I'm going to use. There's no need to impose arbitrary restrictions on yourself unnecessarily, right? Because that's now something you get tons of files, that's something it's hard to manage. Right? Do what's just necessary, and you'll be fine.
And learn to use barrel files so you don't end up with 72 imports in every one of your files.
Yeah, that's So what you're talking about there, Randall, is just to be clear, is that notion of doing one file that has exports in it. That allows you to have like a whole section of your app have a parent Dart file that all it does is it exports all of the sub Dart files from the subdirectory or something like that. And that way, when you go, oh, I need to include my this section of the app home, you just include the home file, which includes the widgets and the models and everything to do with the home section, or something like that.
Cool stuff. All right, a few more to go.
That's
a follow up to the other one.
Supposed to say, I want all the space available. If a list view does that, we get unbounded height error. Was this relating to the column, or was this something?
That was the spatial one. The one that had the text and space.
Right. So let me explain. The reason why you're getting this is that list view is not a column. No, what I mean by that is list views are
scrollable.
They're scrollable, and they have an infinite height space. So there's no fill height space on it, right?
Yeah.
However, if you do want to do something similar, I say similar, then you might want to consider looking at custom scroll view. Custom scroll view lets you put slivers inside, and there's a sliver called sliver fill remaining, which will fill the remaining height of the screen. And there's also sliver list, which is basically what a list view is. A list view is a custom scroll view with a sliver list inside. So maybe there's something there that you want to do with. I think it's about critically understanding what your layout behavior you're trying to do is. A lot of people get unbounded height because they're not. That they're not strictly understanding what they're trying to do with their layout and where the restrictions are. Scrolling is a difficult one. A good example of this is, you've got like the scroll view, but you might have like, let's say you've got 10,000 items in your list. You don't want to tell your layout to lay out all 10,000 items to know where they're going to be in that list. So the way that slivers work in list views essentially are that when you scroll down, it's calculating what it is for the viewport based on the scrolling offset where you are right now. And this way, you're only calculating what you need to calculate, thus making scrolling nice and smooth and fast. This is like, you would not ever want to do all those 10,000 widgets all at once, right? Which is essentially what you do if you stuck a column in a single child scroll view with 10,000 items in. And there'll be no purpose to that, because most people wouldn't see 9,000, whatever it is, 999 items, right? They would see the top 10 items and never scroll down, right? So I think maybe what we should do, Randall, is put this. Do you want to put this on your list of things? But I'm thinking we should do a Twitter style like news feed and show how you build those kind of UIs. I think because that kind of that expression of UI and how you deal with like updates coming in after the fact, after you scroll down, and how you handle the user interaction around that is quite interesting to a lot of people. I think people should put some likes in the chat or whatever, some thumbs up if they're interested.
You know what? We could do it with a real-time server and have people at home coding during the live chat to try to talk to our server. That'd be funny.
I mean, do you know what we could just do is take a filter from the live YouTube chat stream and use the, or maybe not.
Yeah.
I know we have to be careful about putting things live because
there are all sorts of ways that can go sideways. So I should be careful.
To be honest, the filtering on the live chat's pretty good, and I think it could be okay.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty good there.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Next.
Cool. Yep.
Live code push using Shortpad. Yeah, I mean
we can do that in the future. Yeah, we should get Eric on here to do that though.
For sure.
That'd be cool.
For sure. I did actually mention to Eric when I met him last week that we should have him on the show at some point.
Yep.
So we'll see.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Awesome.
Does Simon have a YouTube channel? You're on it. This is Flutter community.
Flutter community. Yes. It's good.
I don't find the time to make my own videos. It's tough enough to find the time to do this show and everything else I do with the community.
Yeah.
So and everything else. I it's a shame because I think we said this before, but it's kind of funny, right? Being outside of Google, right? You get the flexibility to do wherever you want. But it's not your job to do. So it's not my job to do, promotion of Flutter or advocacy of Flutter, right? We're doing this because we like Flutter, right? Me, Randall, the rest of us, right? And if we were being paid to do it, then we probably wouldn't be doing it like this, right? Because we'd have oversight, right? So I think if you can't have both, basically, and so it's a difficult line to kind of follow. But Randall seems to find the time in his busy schedule to do some YouTube videos every now and again. So you should follow Randall on YouTube, and I'm sure he's going to post his link in the chat.
I pasted it earlier. But also I have to say that I have about 10 keys I have to hit, and then I have an idea added to the list of my possible ideas for a show, and I'm up to like 160 ideas. So the problem is there's way more stuff out there than I have time to do. And part of it is that I really want a great way to show each concept.
Okay, so the biggest problem I had this when I was doing my slides for FlutterCon. The biggest problem I have is just visually describing. You have to be able to visually diagram and describe. And what the Flutter team have done with Widget of the Week and some of those other ones, where they kind of show the boxes moving and how things interact, is brilliant. It's exactly what people need. But the problem is that requires structure, that requires script, that requires a design team, that requires like a bunch of effort to get that to that place. And I think I really wish there's more people out there that were designers and developers, that can do both of those things, because then we'd have some really cool content. But that's a very niche market there of people that can do both areas.
There's some AI tools that have come along recently that I'm starting to use one of them. And I actually published my first video on my YouTube channel a couple days ago using this new tool. And I don't make money by referring to them, so I'm not going to refer to them. But it's interesting in that it gives a whole different strategy for being able to edit audio and video together. And they have huge stock libraries, and they do AI generated images if you want. I mean, it's like soup to nuts for building small and medium length videos.
There was a huge influx of videos on YouTube, and I know it was a problem for them, where basically it was auto-generated videos where they would just be generating the voice, the automated computer that do generate script with AI. It would do the voiceover with some fake computer voice or whatever, and then do the imagery to go with it, and then they'd be pushing these things out And I've seen people saying, "Oh, this is a money-making scheme," and like people literally are advertising it as a way of making money, and we'll give you all the tools, and we'll teach you how to do this, you know. And it's like, great, but that's just shitty content, really. It's not. It's
like, and I'm seeing with Medium, for example, I mentioned this earlier. I actually posted a Medium article about this, one of the few that I've published there. Sadly, I should be publishing more, but that says that I'm starting to recognize the. You say smell, but I'm going to call it odor of ChatGPT generated material, because it has a lot of the same feel to it and the same lifeless expression all the way through it, and often is from ChatGPT, so it's 2 years outdated information for Flutter, and that's a huge gap to not have the last 2 years of Flutter in your
so imagine what's happened the last 6 months since January.
Yeah, the Dart 3 stuff, it'll change is lifetime changing for all code. But like, for example, I've seen 5 different Chat GPT like things talking about isolates, and none of them mentioned isolate run, which admittedly was only added 6 months ago in 2.17, whenever that.
But it's definitely the way everyone should be doing it, right? So everyone should make everything pointless that they've done before. Yeah.
Never say isolate spawn unless you have the very rare case of needing to have a persistent second thread, but that's so rare compared to just the lightweightness of spawning something with isolate run and getting the value back and having it be incredibly efficient both over and back and set up and tear down, and errors are thrown and rethrown back in your error on this side for after the Flutter the feature comes back. It's too easy to just say this chunk of code, put it in another thread now. It's just wrap a couple of characters around each side of it and you're done.
I'm wondering how many of them actually also took a look at root isolate token. Do you know what that is?
But no, none of them have mentioned that, because I would know, because I don't know that. I don't even know what you're talking about.
I'm going to share this because, why not? It's another thing. Briefly, before we get to the last question, why not?
Sure.
So we can get this up on stream.
Right. Yeah. Oh. Okay.
So there's a global. There's a global top level thing in the service binding root isolate token. And it represents the root isolate in background isolates. And so basically, when you start up a background isolate using isolate.run, you should run this method, background isolate binary message.ensure initialized. So this is exactly the same way as you would do widgets binding.ensure initialized for your front end isolate. And what this does is this ensures that all of the plugins are registered in the background isolate. This way you can use your image plugin or whatever else, not on the root isolate, but in a background isolate. This was added new to Flutter 3.10, I think it was. And basically you pass over this root isolate token from outside of the scope of your because when you do isolate run, you give it a method where you give it from outside to inside, again using like a lambda or something. And this essentially takes the value of this root isolate token. Which is I think it's like it's got sort of some value on it anyway, and you pass that over, and it basically passes it over and handles all the magical stuff for you, so you don't have to deal with sort of linking up the sort of background plugin stuff behind the scenes. So this does it all for you, really handy. So basically. It's this here, background isolate binary messenger class. This is that kind of the main one. But this
we're down the rabbit hole from where I actually started with this, and I don't know. It's good.
I don't know what we started on now. So whatever.
We got on it because I was talking about how Medium articles are ChatGPT generated.
Oh yeah.
None of them are referring to anything recent, including isolate run. And it's sad to me that there's this much junk out there, and a lot of videos are starting to be these vertical format TikTok style videos. That, as an older person, I'm like, I can appreciate what the kids are doing, but that's just not the format I learn in very well.
To be honest, you just got to compare the widget of the week and the package of the week videos to some of that. It's fast. It's direct. It's to the point. It's very much like modern. However, it is actually good content. Like
that makes a big difference.
What's the word? Just direct, right? Like it, the key features are mentioned, right? And it gives you that, and then it gives you also like they don't try to fit everything, and it gives you those onward journeys to say, oh, now you should go look at this or that now, and then that will take you on an onward journey.
I do think it's telling that YouTube, before you can be monetized, has two different thresholds. One for long content form, which is the number of hours people have watched over the last year in your channel. The other is the short content form, the vertical things. They need 3 million views to qualify for monetization. It's just 3 million views, which is, I mean, you could have a lot less than that if you have 5-minute videos. You know, and it still works. Anyway, it's crazy.
But yeah, I think, yeah, that's right. Now we want to see Craig doing TikTok dances whilst explaining widgets. Definitely.
Exactly.
All right, one last one for you here, I think, in the pipeline.
Oh yeah, RiverPod content. Change notifier and state notifier versus notifier and async notifier. Okay, here's what happened. Remy came up with all the original legacy. We call them legacy now, providers and notifiers. And that's sort of the way RiverPod 1 went. So it wasn't much of a transition from provider, and it wasn't much of a transition from what people were using already in inherited widgets. But those are now considered legacy. You should not be introducing change notifier, state notifier, change notifier provider, state notifier provider, or state provider. Those 5 you should never use again. They're legacy. They're going to be marked deprecated soon, probably the next release of RiverPod, because they use a different internal protocol that doesn't make available to you all the stuff that all the modern stuff does. So notifier, async notifier, and stream notifier, and their respective providers, and provider, feature provider, and stream provider. So those 9 classes are the only ones you should be using now. And this is all in details in the new RiverPod docs. The RiverPod docs are almost landed. It's pretty close. They keep adding a few things there. But one of the frequenters on the RiverPod Discord came up with this beautiful documentation about using generated providers and how to migrate from classic things, and just wonderful documentation. It's live in the Doc V2 page, so you have to click on the link at the top of the page. So if you go to riverpod.dev, click on the top there and get over to the V2 docs, and that will eventually be the real docs, but not quite yet. But yeah, that's the really long answer to the really short one-line question there.
Great. I pulled in a couple of other little final things I'm just going to jump through here.
Sure.
So first of all, Taha, nice to see you. By the way, Taha in Berlin, we had a fun time at FlutterCon. Which FlutterCon talks are you most excited to watch online besides your own, Simon? Shorebird is for me, I think, an interesting one. I'll be honest with you, I can't even remember the schedule. It's such a blur to me right now. So I need to go back through and actually go through it. And I think what I'll probably do is as they get announced, I'm going to choose and see if it's one I want to watch or not. But I've still got a watch list from Flutter Engage and Google I/O. So I don't think I'm getting to them anytime soon, but I try.
There's just too much good content out there. It's really competitive. Yeah.
I want to know, Randall, did you look at the FlutterCon agenda? Did you spot anything that you would like to the look of?
I haven't even had a chance to look. I mean, yeah, I've been so busy working on, upgrading my schedule and starting to include more paid time now. So I have to figure out when I'm doing this and when I'm doing that. And no, I can't be the speaker for that, I guess now. It's getting to be interesting. My schedule is getting crazy. I'm going to have to use something like Google just added something for their calendars that's like Calendly.
Yeah, apparently they're saying they're kind of going to kill Calendly and other things because it's
So I'm thinking about setting that up that my clients can say, yes, I'll take 3:00 on Thursday for your time. That's good. So I've got to work this all out, and I don't have time to watch videos, and of course I always watch videos at double speed because it's people talk at certain speeds. I have
I don't think I could absorb the information if it was double speed. It's way too fast.
Well, if there's like graphics and stuff, I can kind of read the graphics, and I always have captions turned on. Even if the captions are wrong, I can read them quickly. It's speed reading while they're talking, and that seems to work pretty well for input.
There's also that thing where I think you can teach yourself, can't you? So it's like people teach themselves speed reading by going faster and faster and faster. Right? I think it's probably the same with videos. Yeah. Take it up a little notch, speed up, and then you can kind of get the gist of whatever it is.
Well, it's so weird for many years when I was listening to a ton of podcast information. I don't need that anymore, but I was listening to a ton of audio podcasts. I always had it at 1.5 speed. And the point about that is that when I actually have to watch a podcast being done in real time, everything seems so slow to me. It's like, come on, finish that sentence, please. Yes.
And but I wouldn't watch my own Taha. Don't do that. Try not to.
You don't review your.
I do it once. I kind of do it once, and then I'm like, that's it. Like maybe get some tips and think, I did that wrong. I should do that differently next time, and that's it. Like I try to avoid it.
I always sound checked every episode of Floss Week that I always sound checked.
So there's a couple of questions here revolving around the same thing. When will the FlutterCon talks be available online? Soon. And the answer is soon, TM. Basically, we're they're in with the AV company being processed as we speak. We try to do as much editing in camera on the day as possible. And if you want to experience FlutterCon, you can always go to last week's Humpday Q&A, which we did on Thursday. And that actually was live from the event. It was a short one. I don't know the beginning or the end. I was only there. I was there on stage, so I didn't get to see or answer anyone's questions like I am now. So hopefully it was good. All right. Quick few things here. So I wanted to cover this, I know, because I actually had to talk to someone about this recently. How can I create a multi-tenant app in Flutter, such as a seller and buyer on the same app? Well, curiously, it's the same as you just make an app, right? Like there's no real difference. I think that the concern here is about a lot of people do this thing where they create singletons. Singletons are bad for this very reason, right? So suddenly I want to take my application, I want to make multiple instances of my application. I want to have 2 people logged in at once with different accounts, right? Think Gmail. Suddenly you can have multiple Gmail accounts logged in at once. What if the Gmail account has a singleton for getting like the list of inbox or something? Well, now suddenly I've only got one instance of that for my entire application, and everything would fall apart. So generally speaking, there shouldn't be any problem with making some sort of multi-tenant application and having like buyers and sellers or whatever in the same app, or having a buy section, a sell section or whatever with different logins even and everything, right? The point here is you should be able to create an instance of whatever it is that's doing the caching in the back end and use that. And if you're using singleton everywhere, well, then you're doing it wrong, basically. And you need to think about how you can rework your application so to be more instant. What's the word? Don't use singletons.
Instantiable.
Instantiable. Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's invent a word. Instantiable. There you go.
That's a word. It's really a word, actually.
It's really a word. I'm honest. Right. There's a follow-up on a previous answer, so I want to cover this because he's come back to us. This was about the layout builder and parent set state, and he says it's basically trying to add some space underneath a sliver app bar when the app bar is collapsed. So I know that this is the kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that that is kind of common, like you would do in a normal imperative layout, right? So let's say you've got a portion of the top of your screen which is like an app bar, and then you've got like the rest of it is whatever scrolling content. Now you want to say, oh, I want to put like a padding behind that, so push down the content when it's at the top, right? And so what you're doing, like in imperative layout system, is you would go and ask for the height of that widget, and then you go and add a blank widget or padding or whatever in the scrolling content of that same height. And that's what you're trying to talk about. You're trying to make the layout do these looply loops, right? And yes, you can do that, and you can do that with like a value note, like a value notifier, which is something that's built into the framework. And you could say, okay, wrap in a layout, wrap in a single child, custom single child scroll view or whatever else, and get the height of it. The way you actually get the height of a widget correctly is to use what's called a global key, and that gives you put the global key on a widget, and then from that global key you can do global key.context.find render object. Use cast it as a render box or render sliver depending, and get its size. Mm-hmm. It's just not great to do that. And then you could basically say set the size on the value notifier, and then only if the value notifier size has changed, then it will then notify its children and then the listeners, and then that listener can be that padding that's underneath or a widget underneath that would change its height based on what's on top. So that's like kind of how you do it in a reactive layout way. However, you can avoid that altogether in the sense that if you use like a custom layout, right? So the custom layout, you're choosing to lay this out first and then position the thing further down the screen, and you're making that choice in the correct place, which is layout. So I did talk about this in my FlutterCon video actually, but this is about the fact that you have build, layout, draw, right? So your widgets get built, then they get laid out and do that layout algorithm that we just spoke about earlier, which is constraints go down, sizes go up, the parents set the position of the children. And then finally, those render objects get drawn on the screen, and the drawing commands get sent to the GPU, and you see them on the screen. That's the process. And what you're essentially doing with the value notifier and builder, sorry, bear with me, Randall, with the value notifier and builder, is that you're basically saying, okay, when build takes place, once I've done layout, once I've done draw of my app bar, then I get the height of it. I then push that back around, and then we do another build, layout, and draw of everything all over again. And what Danielle was talking about earlier when you asked this question, we answered it, was the fact that if you're not careful, you make a loop. And that goes again, and that goes again. And then you make an infinite loop of, right, let's make frames every single time if you're not careful. So the thing with a value notifier is it breaks that because it checks the previous value, and if it's the same, it doesn't call the notify listeners. So that's that thing. And then frankly, you've done the sliver app bar. You say you want it so when it's collapsed, it takes up the space. Well, sliver app bar doesn't give you the parameter for this, but sliver persistent header bar. Hang on, I'm going to find the name of that. Sliver, I'll find it now. Does. What you actually need to do is if you go look at the side sliver app bar, it actually uses a sliver persistent header. That's the one. Sliver persistent header. I'll bring that up on stream briefly. So this widget is the underlying widget of sliver app bar. And basically you give it a delegate, and that delegate can do whatever the hell you want. And if you notice here, there's floating and pinned. And these two flags in conjoin mean that you get that thing where it's pushed down, but it can still scroll off and come in, and it doesn't cover up the content. But equally enough, inside the delete, you can do a bunch of configuration, not just on how it works, but also on the build, and you get back, does it overlap the content, and you can change your behavior. So this gives you the flexibility you need to customize that behavior however you want. Sliver persistent header. I think it kind of covers what I was going to say about this. And I know
that's fine. A couple more quick things. One is, again, I mentioned Boxy earlier, but one of the things that you have to watch out for is using a global key to find out what the size of something is. That's the size on the previous build, essentially. You can't use it already in this build because you're taking the size of the widget that it already was, and that might mean you have one stray build each time. Boxy eliminates that by actually doing parts of the operation very similar to the way Layout Builder does, where it kind of runs some of the stuff forward through the layout phases so that you can actually say, this is the widgets that are going to be in here. Let me get their sizes by doing that part of the layout algorithm, getting their size back, and doing that all in sequence in one build rather than waiting for the build to happen, then running again. The next build would then have the sizes from the previous run. This does it all at the same time in one run. Same way Layout Builder gives you size of the leftover space.
There's some common patterns like these that you can then start doing with the layout algorithm. To say that you can also do a lot of this stuff with inbuilt widgets. You don't have to use Boxy. And there's actually some tricks. I want to actually here's one for you to add to your list, Randall. To do this kind of thing, we have an overlapping like widget. You can actually do that with simply an align widget.
Yep.
If you set an align widget's height factor to 0, it provides no layout height. However, you can set it to align to center, and now it's going to be centered on its starting point, and you can actually have these kind of effects.
There's actually a bit of discussion in the Boxy documentation about why multi-child custom layout isn't quite the same, or what you'd have to do in that and compared to what you do in Boxy. And Boxy's like 5 lines of code and you've got your thing laid out exactly the way you want it to. Really clever stuff. By the way, just as a coincidence, I talked about Puro with great enthusiasm earlier. Same guy did Boxy. So they're bringing full circle in this talk today. Exactly.
Should probably get him on the stream sometime.
Yeah, he's a cool guy. He's one of the admins for the Discord, for the Flutter community Discord. So very cool guy.
Right, and just to quickly follow up, we did see the follow up here, which was because my scroll widget kind of hides underneath it. I guess under the app bar, I have a tab bar, and all the tabs with scrollables. And if I scroll one, they all hide underneath the app bar. So what you're probably looking for is sliver sticky headers. I think it is on pub, and that will make it stick to the top. But equally enough, look at custom app bars so they don't like hide and cover up each other. You can do all that with slivers. It's all an inbuilt thing. There's lots of options, but yeah, hopefully that helps. What was this bit here? Yeah, and then detect if it's collapsed or not is what it said. But again, it's about understanding. I think we just said this briefly, but sometimes knowing the way the system works helps you look at what the solution should be. It sounds to me like because you're trying to come out from the wrong end of how the system works, and that's probably why you're not getting good results, or you're not finding the results online that are helpful to you. But anyway,
cool.
All right, I think that's the last.
Before we get finished, just a couple of things for Puro and why to use Puro instead of FVM. It's a smaller, faster, cheaper, all that sort of stuff, but it has 2 built-in things that I think are just Easter eggs. Puro eval line of Dart code. It will run that. It'll compile and run it in VM mode and spit it out. But also, I just found out recently, Puro REPL in return gives you an interactive shell that you can type Dart code at. Oh my goodness. All that stuff is inside Puro. I don't know why either of those things are in there. I think the designer is just crazy guy and just said, well,
there's been several Dart REPL solutions, and I think that it's a really good idea, especially when you're coming from a world of other languages that have REPL.
Right.
So
So Puro has those too. So if no other reason to get Puro, get it for the REPL and the one line of Dart executed as a command. Puro eval. It's pretty fun. Anyway, enough on that.
Right.
And we're done, right?
I think that's it. We're done. Yeah, we're done.
Okay.
So
cool.
What do we say? Come back in 100 and something odd hours?
167 hours.
167.
No, 165 hours. 165 because it's 3.
Yeah, way too long today.
163
so far. Oh wow.
Well, remember we only did a 45-minute show last week, so I was saying maybe this show could be 5 hours to kind of make up for it.
No,
but no, definitely no. I'm hungry. I gotta eat food.
I need dinner. I need dinner and sleep.
Yep.
That's what
I need lunch. All right.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, Simon. Good to see you again.
Get your questions ready for next week. Maybe we should. What was I saying? We should build. How is it like a Twitter feed kind of thing.
Yeah, watching a constantly growing Firebase.
Yeah, had you had new data coming in, keeping the scroll position, had you do that kind of infinite scroll kind of thing. Yeah, I think people like that.
That'd be wonderful. That'd be great to check out. All right. See you next week, guys.
See you next week.
See you online. Bye.